Hey everybody, happy Thursday and welcome to another Techstrong TV broadcast. Today is Thursday, March 3rd. I am Charlene O'Hanlon and counting down 2 weeks until St. Patrick's Day, guys. Yes, we've got a great Techstrong TV broadcast for you today. As always, we're going to get things kicked off with a conversation between Alan and Stephen Cavey, who is the co-founder and chief evangelist over at Ground Labs. They talk about 5G and security. We've been talking about 5G for quite a while now and eagerly awaiting its ubiquity. But there are certainly some cybersecurity issues surrounding 5G. So Stephen and Alan talk about some of those and what organizations can do to protect themselves. It's a really fascinating conversation. After that, Alan speaks with Vadim Ojevetsky, who is the co-founder and Chief Experience Officer over at Imply.io. They are chatting about updates to what's Imply is doing with a project Shapeshift, which is, they just reached milestone 1, which includes the launch of a new product and cloud service, as well as a private preview of a major architectural expansion of Apache Druid. So for those of you who don't know what Project Shapeshift is, it is a 12-month initiative to tackle the most pressing issues that developers face when building modern analytics applications, which is kind of interesting. They're actually doing it through a series of new technologies and methodologies. So this is an update on what's going on with that. It's a great conversation as well. After that, we have a very short Haunted Hacker podcast for you. This one is only about 40 minutes long. In this one, host Mike Jones is speaking with Fabrizio Di Carlo, who is the head of product and infrastructure security over at ScoutBee. And they discuss Fabrizio's journey through into cybersecurity. Plus, they talk about artificial intelligence and machine learning. Really, who's not these days in security, as well as the OWASP Top 10 reports, ransomware, and so many other things during this short presentation or discussion. So check it out. It's always a good time over at the Haunted Hacker. After that, we have our Something Old segment, which is from the recent Predict 2022 event. This one is a keynote address, I believe. It's called The Future of Observability, and it features Mitch Ashley from Techstrong Research, Lodvik Bogards, who is from Stack State, Brian Dawson from Dawson & Dawson, Inc., and Cyril Leclerc from Elastic. And they have a very spirited panel discussion about observability, what it means in 2022, what are some of the drivers that are creating the need for observability, and what steps organizations can take here in 2022 to reach their observability goals. And so much more is discussed in this panel. It's really, really worth checking out. So highly encourage you to stick around for that one. All right, and then I have the news headlines for you, and then I have a great conversation with Liliana Monge, who is the co-founder and CEO of Sabio Coding Bootcamp. Sabio is a bootcamp that is geared toward female coders, and so she and I discuss ways that they're working to close the diversity gap in careers in technology. So not just application development, but other areas as well. Just even learning to code can be a beneficial skill for pretty much anybody, and she really does like to focus on making sure that there is gender equity and parity. So it's a great conversation she and I have. After that, I've got the webinar's preview for you, and then we close things out with the view with Vizard. In this conversation, Mike Vizard speaks with Kubler CTO Oleg Chernykin, who is debunking the top 3 myths surrounding Kubernetes. It's a great conversation there. All right, we've got a fantastic lineup for you today, and we're actually going to get things kicked off right after these commercial messages. All right. right, we are back, kicking off today's Techstrong TV broadcast. We've got a conversation between Alan and Stephen Cavey, who is the co-founder and chief evangelist over at Ground Labs. They're having a great conversation about 5G and security. This is a very relevant topic. A lot of organizations are looking into 5G now that it's actually a thing, but there are certainly some cybersecurity concerns surrounding that. So this is a great conversation, especially if your organization is considering making the move to 5G. So let's go ahead and roll it now.
This is Digital Anarchist.
Hey everyone, welcome to another Techstrong TV interview. My guest for this segment is Steve Cavey. Steve is with Ground Labs. Hey Steve, welcome back to Techstrong TV.
Alan, it's a real pleasure to be with you here again. It was, what was it, April 2020, just as the world was going a bit crazy when we last spoke.
Was it that long? My God.
It was.
Yeah, and here we are, hopefully, just when the world is, well, I don't want to say the world's returning to sanity with everything going on in Europe and everywhere else, but...
I am an optimist, though. I mean, think about, there was just so many unknowns that particular month. And, I think now we've got a lot more airplanes back in the sky. We've got people moving around again. We've got people getting back into the office. I think there is a lot to be positive about. There's always going to be something to not be positive about.
There's always stuff going on in the world.
There is.
Yes, there is. Steve, for folks who aren't familiar with Ground Labs, why don't you just, I don't want to take a lot of time if it's okay, but and I don't want to shortcut you either, but give people a little Ground Labs background if you don't mind.
Absolutely. So Ground Labs has been around for 15 years. The reason why we exist is because of the issue around companies not understanding where their data is. You look at a lot of the data breaches that happen, and very often the data that's been stolen is data that the organization never knew that they were even storing in the first place. So we help companies scan across all of their storage, whether it's on-prem or in the cloud, whether it's the endpoint on the server, and all of the strange and wonderful and hidden places where data tends to end up. And we give them a full picture of all the personal, the PI, the sensitive data that's hiding from over 50 different countries, over 300 types of personal data that we can find. And we lay it all out in a single pane of glass. And then we can help you make some risk-based decisions. We can help you do some remediation, cleaning that data up, encrypting it, deleting it, masking it, doing a few other things. And we can also help you spread the responsibility of this cleanup work across into the organization, rather than the IT guys or the security team feeling like they're the ones that have to go to all that effort to clean up the mess that frankly weren't the people that created that mess in the first place. So it makes sense to put it back onto the people who did create that mess. I guess that in a nutshell sums up, we provide the truth of what's really happening when it comes to the handling and storage of sensitive data across your organization.
Very cool. We provide the truth. If you can leave it right there, that's good. Hey, Stephen, you know what? I didn't even mention your title, of course, with the company. Why don't you talk a little bit about yourself?
Sure. So I'm one of the co-founders and chief evangelist here at Ground Labs. Before this, I was in network security. I've got a background stemming all the way back to the ISP days of the 1990s. That was where I cut my teeth on learning networking. And that went through the whole e-commerce boom that we saw through the 2000s. And I strangely ended up in payments as a natural progression of all of that. And that's where I really became exposed to the security issues that were evolving in the world, and then the layering on of all these new compliance standards and regulations that had to come about because, frankly, businesses weren't doing the best thing when it came to data and how data was being secured. And so I kind of became immersed in that. And that's where Ground Labs spawned out of, is this thing that we saw where data was being stored everywhere. And it was just being freely exchanged and handled and emailed and all sorts of other, from a security standpoint, absolutely atrocious things. But organizations didn't have the tools to find that data and lock it down and do the right thing with it. So Ground Labs was born out of trying to make that process simple, and some of our biggest fans in the world ended up being the security auditors, the assessors. And so, I guess my background coming from networking, going into payments, and then through to security and compliance kind of fits in well with what we do today.
Absolutely. It's funny listening to you. We spoke briefly off camera, but my background also started back in the heady days of the commercial internet coming to life in the 90s. For me, out on Long Island, and I thought I was a virtual landlord selling virtual real estate on Sun machines back then, and hooking everyone up to that same T1 line that we charged the same price for, even though there was only I think one T1 line. Actually, there was a time when we got to the T3 and we thought, oh my God, and yeah,
we
started the same way. Yeah.
And then I also went to payments, because the whole e-commerce thing, and then
got involved in e-payments, and of course cybersecurity as well, and then PCI and that whole thing. But I look at the speeds and feeds back then, because it was more, I was doing hosting more than pure ISP, and it was all speeds, feeds, and bits and bytes, right? And now you look at just speeds, feeds over your phone, and we're setting up. We just expanded the office, so we had to rejig the network and WAN and LAN and all that. And we're on the verge of another, I think, generational change in bandwidth and in our ability to utilize ever increasing amounts, because there's some sort of Moore's law here, where the more bandwidth you have available, the more ways we find to fill it up.
Yeah.
Right. And 5G and all that represents. I mean, it's kind of like wireless Ethernet, or more. At these levels. Of course, like everything else on the internet, it's why we can't have nice things. It presents its own security challenge.
Yeah, you got me thinking there, Alan, because I often do think about, what if I could take my phone back in time to those days? I could run the entire ISP off what our phone can do today, and the overall bandwidth capability would be several hundred times faster than what we were paying and what we had access to, in the form of a T1 line, or what, in Australia we called it an ISDN line. 128 kilobits, it did 16 kilobytes a second. That means that 1 megabyte would take more than a few seconds, and that was the norm. And when you were a user at home, you were downloading at 3 to 4 kilobytes a second. That was the absolute max that a modem dialing over an old analog phone line could do.
Line. Yep.
And everybody accepted it because that was the technology back then. And now, even before we think about 5G, the fact that we can download hundreds of megabytes in no time at all. And, I think this whole work from home revolution wouldn't have been as possible 10 years ago as it was instantly, in the last 2 years, because of the speeds that we have access to. I remember trying to work from home in the early 2000s, and the speed was a huge barrier to productivity, having to wait for things to come down before you could work on them. And now it's instantaneous. And so I think the fact that when we've got people working from home, and it's like we are all sitting on the same local area network, is a real enabler. And I think what makes it very realistic to think about work from home as really not that different from the work from the office scenario, when you take out the human consideration and the in-person interaction. You put that aside, the technology really gives you no excuses.
Well, there's a chicken and egg piece of this, right? Because what happens is, with that kind of access, or with that kind of bandwidth, the kinds of applications we can run kind of fill the vacuum, right? We couldn't do video. We couldn't do Zoom like this.
No.
Right? Without that kind of bandwidth. I think back, I think the first time I played a video, if you will, on the computer was I think the Jimmy Stewart film, It's a Wonderful Life, the copyrights came off it, and people were putting it out on DVD. Might have been a CD, maybe it wasn't a DVD yet. But anyway, it played on my 486 machine or whatever. And it was a postage stamp size video. If you expanded it, you could, to the screen, it was a 14-inch monitor, VGA, maybe it was SVGA. It looked terrible. And that wasn't even online. That was just the internal bus on the computer from a CD player. The first time we started, do you remember the first videos over your phone? They weren't very good.
They weren't very good. I mean, my first experience like that was audio. When actually we started the ISP, but before we onboarded any users, we just remember going, my goodness, this is the most amount of bandwidth we've ever had access to in our life. What can we do with it? And at that time, Sony had some music that you could actually play off their website. Yeah. And we just remember hearing full stereo audio coming down this 16 kilobyte a second line.
It was wow. Even though it's probably crappy audio, we think of it now.
Yeah, I mean, here's buffering and echo, but it's still.
Remember the Real Video? That was the dominant brand back then, right? Real Video streaming. Right? Yeah. What it took to set up a streaming player. Now, I mean, hey, Zoom is a verb.
Right? Let's Zoom.
Yeah. And I think I'm really excited now about, you mentioned 5G before. I think you talk about where the future is heading. We're in the infancy of the next evolution of connectivity. And I think 5G is a real stepping stone on that. But, obviously I come from a security background, so thinking about that from a security standpoint brings about a whole new raft of issues.
It really does. I don't think it's even a stepping stone. I think it's a gateway to a whole new era, right? I think it's another quantum kind of leap up from where we were before, especially when we fully roll out 5G.
Exactly.
But like you said, there's going to be security issues, right? Let's talk about, and we can't anticipate everything, I get it, but, clue people in, Stephen, give them a sense of what some of these issues are.
Yeah, the sorts of issues that I think about when we talk about 5G, first and foremost, let me just state really clearly, using a 5G network isn't going to specifically introduce a new vulnerability on your computer that you've just connected through your phone as a hotspot. That's not what I think about when we talk about security issues. But, in our world, security issues are only increasing, they're not decreasing. We fix one set of problems, one set of vulnerabilities, patch a whole bunch of things, and the bad guys are now trying to break into us with the next set of vulnerabilities that's become available. And that's just going to be a forever cycle that we never completely solve. There will always be a new way to try and break into a system or a network or a device, and keeping ahead of that is going to be the game. And that's why people in security will always be needed. But I think introducing 5G introduces a new set of considerations. It's an exciting technology. It's going to provide a lot more scale in terms of concurrency, in terms of the number of devices that we can have. So that's going to drive a lot more devices to be connected, particularly with the new eSIM technology, where you can have a device that doesn't need a physical SIM card and can just connect to a 5G network in the air and immediately get online, get an IP address, and start communicating on the internet and contacting other hosts. Think about that for a second. We've been talking about IoT for a while now. We've seen some botnet attacks, some denial of service things going on there. Even your average website hosting provider now includes DDoS mitigation because it's a real threat. And this is only going to become more challenging as more devices are just going to be added onto the internet through 5G technology, because suddenly you have more devices that are connected concurrently and have access to far more bandwidth than we've ever had before. So I think that's the second part of the challenge, is the data transfer capabilities. It's both a wonderful thing. The opportunity that comes from that is amazing. The fact that you can do gigabit speed through the air. I mean, I think the theoretical speed of 5G is 20 gigabits. I mean, that's insane. I just did a speed test today. My gigabit connection here at my home office, I'm pulling 900 megabits a second. And, I'm really proud of that. But, I think
about 10 times that.
Yeah. Exactly. Well, maybe, in a practical standpoint, maybe not. But even, right now, I just had a look at the speed reports. I think Korea's pushing the highest 5G throughput at about 500-600 megabits right now. As we said before, we're still in the infancy of where 5G rollouts are at.
So I think that's one thing we should make clear to our audience, especially here in the States. What we're calling 5G, what's being offered right now under the name 5G, is baby steps, right? This is not the full 5G that we may see in
from zero to
a couple of years, right?
No, there's about 95,000 base stations deployed right now globally. I think there's about 1,000 in your neck of the woods there in Florida, assuming that's where you still are at the moment.
Yes,
and so it's. Not everybody is on. Not everybody has an iPhone 13 or a, whatever the latest Android device is. But, it won't be that many years from now where everybody is on 5G by default, just like 4G is now. It's crazy to think that not that long ago to be on 4G was a privilege. I remember
just
2011.
AT&T discontinued 3G. They announced plans to discontinue their 3G network. But here's the other thing that to me is a wild card, and that is when you give innovative people capability like 5G speed throughputs, they are going to innovate, and we're going to see new classes of applications.
Yes.
Right? That kind of take up that vacuum, because nature abhors a vacuum. And these new classes of applications may introduce new security concerns that we have that are different, that aren't the run of the mill, that aren't what we've seen before. Just and it's hard to anticipate the unknown, right? And that, I'm not trying to fearmonger people or scare you away from 5G at all, but I do think that is something security people have to be thinking about. We have to watch what are the applications that this is spawning or enabling.
I think we're going to see an era where we're coming from a time where you need to be strong in your offline capability, and then if connectivity is available, then we go online. And I think we'll see a flip on that. It'll be online by default for almost everything that we do, and offline will be rarely used, if available at all. It'll be really strange to not be connected through some form as this sort of connectivity becomes completely ubiquitous. And particularly with, as I said, eSIMs before, and the fact that we can probably move between networks as well. So if one network's down, no problems as a cooperative with another network to get online through those guys. So I think we'll see all sorts of interesting things there. But, back to the security issue, I think about it in terms of what are the real threats that businesses need to think about. And the way I imagine this, particularly, again, over the last 2 years, we've gone to a very high level of remote work, more than we've ever done before. And remote work means so many different things now. It means a little bit like me sitting in the home office on a fiber broadband connection that's terrestrial. But a lot more people are now, I just had a video call this afternoon with someone actually not too far from you. And I could clearly see in the background, he was sitting on the edge of water with a few palm trees around, just having a video call outside. And that, I think that capability and that possibility will be far more normal with 5G. You'll be able to do anything. You will not have any perceived barriers about being able to hold a video call or not hold a video call, whether you're in a physical property with a terrestrial line or you're out and about with a 5G connection. But from a business threat standpoint, I think what this really does is wakes everybody up to the idea that your remote workers are going to be connected to very high speeds all the time, even when they're out and about roaming on a mobile. And so I think from an attack threat vector point of view, previously the attack threat vectors were more focused on devices that were well connected, responded really quickly. They're sort of the top of the pecking order in terms of the more likely type of device that you would want to compromise if you were a criminal looking to assemble a botnet or looking to do data exfiltration of any decent volume.
Hey everybody, happy Tuesday. Welcome to another Techstrong TV broadcast. Today is Tuesday, March 8th. I'm Charlene O'Hanlon, and I want to kick things off by wishing my sister a happy birthday. Happy birthday, Donna. All right, we've got a great lineup on today's show. We get things kicked off with a conversation between Alan and Idit Levine, who is with Solo.io. She is the CEO. And Solo.io just recently announced some major product news. Actually, it's coming out today. It's Glue Mesh 2.0. The company is announcing the news at its community-driven virtual event that's happening today called SoloCon. SoloCon it offers up information on the latest about Service Mesh, eBPF, GraphQL, WebAssembly, Envoy Proxy, Istio, and so much more. But this new technology, it's the Istio Service Mesh and Control Plane, simplifies the configuration and operation of service-to-service connectivity within distributed applications. They also have the beta release of GraphQL for Glue Edge. Good stuff all the way around, and there's a lot to unpack in this conversation, so definitely want to check it out. After that, Alan speaks with Chris Wysopal, easy for me to say, co-founder and CTO over at Veracode. Chris and Alan basically talk about what's going on with Veracode, so it's an update on the company. Also, they've been doing a lot of growth and growing very, very fast and very, very furious, so they talk about why that's happening. Also talking about the recent State of Enterprise Software Survey results that they recently... Can I just do the second one again?
Sure.
Sorry, I'm just like tripping over my tongue here.
Right.
All right. All right. 3, 2, 1. All right. After that, Alan has a conversation with Chris Wysopal, who is the co-founder and CTO over at Veracode. Chris and Alan discuss Veracode's continued growth. Good stuff for the company. Also, some of the results from the recent State of Enterprise Software Survey and some of the market conditions in the application security space. So broad range of topics, but all very, very relevant. So you definitely want to check out that conversation as well. After that, we've got the Haunted Hacker podcast. And this is part 2 of a 2-part conversation that Mike Jones has with Ken Underhill, who is with CyberLife. And they talk a lot about Ken's, his story in cybersecurity, his mental health issues, and how important it is to reach out if you are having problems. And basically what life is like as Ken Underhill. And there's a lot of other things that they discuss during the podcast, but it's a really fascinating discussion as always, so you want to check that one out. After that, we have the latest episode in our DevOps Unbound series. This one is called DevOps and Compliance Synergy, Reality or Fiction. And in this one, we have Sonia Lawrence from Tricentis, Anna Murray from Rocket Software, Dan Kirsch from Techstrong Research, and Tim Johnson from CloudBees. They're joining Alan and Mitch Ashley to discuss how to effectively integrate compliance as part of the DevOps process and the changes that come with it, and so much more. It is a great topic, and there is a lot of information that is bandied about during this discussion. So definitely check it out. After that, we have our Something Old segment. This is from the Predict 2022 virtual event. This one features Ori Inbar, who is the CEO of Augmented World Expo. This is a fascinating topic. It is called Envisioning the Impact of Spatial Computing, aka the Metaverse, on our lives by 2030. So Ori goes into basically how the technology has improved to the point where we actually could be living in the metaverse within the next 8 to 10 years, and how that is going to impact the way we live, work, and communicate and interact with each other. It's a great presentation. I encourage you to check it out. Such a good one. After that, we've got the news headlines. That would be me. And then I have a conversation with Katie Noble, who's the director of PCERT and the bug bounty over at Intel Corporation. Katie and I talk about the bug bounty program over at Intel, how it has expanded with Project Circuit Breaker, which brings together a community of elite hackers to hunt bugs in firmware, hypervisors, GPUs, chipsets, and more. She and I discussed the first of these efforts and how Intel is planning to take the initiative even further beyond Project Circuit Breaker. Great discussion, and if cybersecurity is your bag, baby, you definitely want to check out this conversation. After that, I've got the webinar's preview, and then we close things out with a view with Vizard, in which Mike Vizard is speaking with Guljeet Nagpal, who is the Chief Product Officer over at XLQ. They discuss why automated testing has become a necessity. Indeed, it has. All right, that is today's lineup. It's a good one, folks. I hope you can stick around for the entirety. We're going to get things kicked off right after these commercial messages. All right, we are back kicking things off on today's Techstrong TV broadcast. We have a conversation between Alan and Idit Levine, who's the CEO of Solo.io. They are discussing some new product enhancements to Glue Mesh 2.0 that is actually being announced at today's community-driven virtual event called SoloCon. So Idit and Alan talk about the new technology improvements, as well as what's going on over at SoloCon. It is a great conversation. Let's roll it now.
This is Digital Anarchist.
Hey everyone, welcome to another Techstrong TV interview. I am so happy to be joined by my friend Idit Levine. Idit is the CEO founder of Solo.io. Wicked smart woman. I always enjoy talking with her. It's been too long and we were talking off camera, but she's been a little bit busy and she's going to tell you all about it in a second. Hey Idit, welcome to Techstrong TV.
Hey, thanks so much, Alan. It's great to see you and be here.
Good to see you.
Yeah.
Good to have you on. So, Idit, before we jump into the news, you know, I think most people in our audience are familiar with Solo.io, but maybe some aren't. So why don't we start there just real quickly, give them a quick background.
Sure. So I started Solo around 4 years ago, and Solo was focusing on solving the next problem that people will have after they will migrate from monolithic to microservices. So when people usually moving from monolithic to microservices, it's giving a lot of credibility for them, and it's giving a lot of functionality, scale, velocity, but it's also creating a lot of new problems. because now there is a lot of problem of mainly connectivity, right? How do you connect? If you're taking something that is big and cut it to small pieces, how do you reconnecting it basically? When I'm saying reconnecting, I'm talking about communication between those services. So how do services communicate to each other? How do you make sure that it's in a safe way? And how do you making sure that you can see what's going on when a request coming to all this cluster of microservices? So that's the things that we were focusing about it. So in generally connectivity, we're calling it application networking. So everything that the application need, that's related to networking in order to basically be successful in what it should do. So that's in the nutshell. Yeah. And we're focusing on a few technologies, right? So API gateway, specifically Envoy-based, service mesh like STL, eBPF. So we think that eBPF will be an amazing tool to basically enhance the service mesh. And last and not least is GraphQL. And again, this is honestly, all of this is kind of like evolved based off customer requests.
Yeah. I mean, I love talking with you because you really have your finger on what it is organization, what people are dealing with, right? As they make this move to microservices. And make no mistakes, there's a millions of good reasons to move to microservices, right? No one's saying not to, but it does. It adds some complexity. It adds a different set of problems that you need to deal with, and some of the solutions, or at least some of the frameworks around which solutions are built, are as you mentioned. This whole idea of mesh and service mesh is one of the biggest ones. But you used the word, was it application connectivity?
Application networking. Yeah, everything that the application.
That's a new one. I'll have to start using that because I haven't used that one yet. All right. So, and Solo, I might add, has been one of the leaders out here in this space, for the last 4 years, bringing solutions to market. And you guys are about to enhance your product line, your offerings, next generation stuff. But why don't you tell them? I
don't want to,
For sure. Okay, so first of all, a year ago, right, we started getting a lot of customers. So as part of this, basically, the customer asked us, look, we really wanted to get together right now. Don't forget COVID, no one can get together, but at least virtually get together, right? And basically share, use cases, how they're using the product, how they're solving those problems, or it's a very complex problem. So last year we started the first time, we basically did SoloCon, the first SoloCon. We're doing exactly the same thing this year, again, pair of request of the customer. So it's an annual conference. And as part of it, we will have a lot of customers sharing their story and us sharing about what we were doing on the last year. And if there's anything I can say about the last year for Solo, like if you need to pick and choose a word that kind of like showing what we did, was growth, right? Seriously, like we have, like if you look at the metrics, it's insane about how quick we getting more and more customers. Therefore, we needed to grow the team dramatically. So everything that we're doing is basically very, very kind of like a hyper, exponential growth. So, we building product for the last 4 years, but honestly, every year we're getting more and more customers, and more customers basically helping us because we understand more and more use cases. So to me, like if you see what we are going to announce right now, honestly, the strength that Solo is that there is hundreds of customers, and probably one that you're using every day, when you buying something, when you're getting into US or anything that you're doing, it's basically you're going through us. And as part of it, in those complex environment, force us to learn a lot. So in SoloCon, we're going to announce a few announcements. The first one and foremost is regarding to our service mesh product. So we have a service mesh product called Glue Mesh. And that product specifically, again, it's not a new product, right? It's basically evolved, but if you look at the blog that I wrote in end of 2018, you will see that vision didn't change. And what we basically did is we understood what will be the problem that people will have once they will use the open source STL. And we went and basically make it very simple to use. and we were focusing on multi-cluster, but while working with customer, we had a lot of other requests for customers of how we can make it better. And instead of kind of like, it was such a huge impact that instead of kind of like doing incrementally and change a little bit, we decided to kind of like do a refresh and take everything that we learned and put into the product and reassemble everything back to make sure that we will have the best user experience. So we're announcing Glue Mesh 2.0. It's a brand new API. The idea with those API is to cover two things. Number one, which is very important, is basically, our platform, Glue Mesh, is a service mesh and an API gateway together, right? All of them built on top of STL. It was very important to me that the API will look and feel like one product. It didn't once in the beginning. So basically what we did, we basically make it that way that doesn't matter if you're using service mesh, if you're using API gateway, doesn't matter if you use them together. It's the same idea. We're taking policy and apply them. So in terms of the user experience, it's just very cleaner. The last one that we have learned, which I think is very important, and the biggest concept that we brought is the notion of workspace. And what do I mean when I'm saying it? Why people using service mesh? Why people using anything in the infrastructure? Because they want to enable the application team. That's their job. They are giving services to someone else. So, someone maybe will come, it's install Glue Mesh, it will register the clusters, it will put some policy on it, but it will put a, service mesh everywhere. Maybe some of them will be FIPS compliant, some of them will be regular, but eventually what he wants is to care part of their infrastructure, which means basically namespace, could be in different clusters, right? Care of it, decided what he allow or not allow that application team to do, and delegate it to them. And that's the notion of workspace. So basically what we did there, I think, honestly, we have a lot of customers, so we run that API by a lot of them, and they love it. This is exactly what organizations do. And our product right now is perfect fit to all those organizations trying to run STL in production. So STL or API gateway. And that's exactly what we did. So this is one of the biggest announcements that we make. Honestly, and you know me, I'm building software for a long time. I swear to God, that's the best one we ever put out there. It's so beautiful. Like the code is so beautiful that it's like a heart. Seriously, art is it's beautiful. It's scalable. It's insanely tested. And honestly, like I'm so excited about how beautiful we did it. So that's kind of like
you're so excited. I'm excited.
Honestly, this is one of the biggest things.
It is, but you know what? Look, I'm an entrepreneur. I've done many companies.
That is what's the difference with startups versus sometimes bigger companies where they're not as personally hands-on, is that enthusiasm, because you know what your customers are asking for. You know where the problems are. And when you could build something that hits it, that's dead on like that, it's exciting. That's why we do this. Yeah, you do it for money, and yeah, you do it, all of that, great. But really,
not for money, honestly.
Yeah, it's deeper down. There's a deeper reason, is that somehow you think what you're doing makes the world better.
Yes,
it makes the world better, and that's important.
Let me back up a second. I want to let people know, when is SoloCon?
SoloCon is in March 8th, which is coming up right now.
So next week. Yep.
Yes. It's going to be there. It's pretty exciting. There is a lot of people, a lot of register already, and also, honestly, a lot of stories. So you will see there USAA, you will see there Chick-fil-A, you will see there T-Mobile. So a lot of our customers and way more customers is talking there. You will see the different cloud providers. So like we have a joint call with Google Cloud. We have a joint talks with Amazon, as well as to an amazing speaker for the keynote. So Solomon Hike, the founder of Docker and now Dagger, as well as and then Louis Ryan, who is the founder of STL. Both will be on the keynote. So really exciting, exciting lineup. I think the content will be huge.
Excellent. Where can people go tune into this?
So it's just solocon.io, and you can go and you register. It's free, right? I mean, our job is, technology is not enough. We wanted to live in education. So, that's what it is for. It's for everyone. Just come and join, and, you will learn a lot. Alan, before we go, if I really wanted to talk about
we got
that.
plenty of time. Go ahead. I just wanted to make sure we got that in for people to go see. Talk more. Tell me more. Come.
Yeah, no, I just wanted to talk about the other announcement that we're making, which I'm really, really excited about that. And that's the GraphQL one. So we basically, we did kind of like, we came with that vision in 2017 and released it, but we didn't have the resource to work on there. So that's basically what we did right now. And honestly, we talked to our customer, right? We have a lot of API gateway customers. And what we discover is that there is this problem in the organization. It's a new problem that appeared. And that's the fact that a lot of those UI and a front-end team and the application team basically really excited about GraphQL. So now the question is what they should do about that. So they're basically going and spinning up a GraphQL server themselves. And now it's another piece in your infrastructure that you need to take care of it. And somehow they need to go to the IT team who's not really understand why they need this extra piece. And it's an API piece. So how do you make sure that it's secure and safe and scale? And there is a lot of problem around that. So basically a lot of our customer came to us and said to us, look, can you somehow make us control this GraphQL? Can you somehow make it better? So what we were working for the last year, which is honestly very tough problem to do, is to take GraphQL and embedded it inside Envoy. So basically we teach Envoy how to speak GraphQL language, which is pretty insane. So now you don't need to spin up a GraphQL server because your Envoy or your SAT, in the API gateway or in the sidecar is basically can act as a GraphQL. And it's taking advantage of everything that we already did inside, all the security stuff, rate limiting, external auth, IDC, OPA, everything that we already, observability of Envoy, everything that you already have, now you can embed it on the GraphQL, either on the level of the request or the resolver. So it's really, really powerful. It's preventing you to have another hop because usually you're going to an API gateway, we're going to a GraphQL, we're going to the microservices. Now you don't need that. You're going to the API gateway, the API gateway, just know what to do. And I think this is honestly very unique, but so powerful. And I'm telling you because we have customers standing in line for that right now, honestly. So just wanted to put their hands on. So, we will announce the beta on, it's a very, very solid beta, honestly. Been done already. We have customers who did workshop on this and try that and put their own on this. But just to be fair and be, a little bit more sure about that, we put it as a beta, but then immediately it will go to GA. And honestly, that's to me, again, this is innovation, right? This is take something that no one else done. And honestly, it's not that trivial to do and put the resource, the amazing resource that Solar has to do that. So.
And this will also be announced at SoloCon, and people will be able to sign up for the beta and start using it.
Yeah, I mean, Solar is not a small company anymore like we were, but I think we raised $135 million recently in a $1 billion valuation. So we are a unicorn. And, all of this is basically, help us to grow dramatically. So our engineering team is expanding dramatically. And what an engineering team, like honestly, like everyone who's working in Solar is so strong. So that's allowing us to do more. So if it's in the service mesh ecosystem, the API ecosystem, the GraphQL ecosystem, and also the eBPF, which we really, really passionate and working a lot. So that's another thing that we will announce.
Couldn't happen to a nicer woman, Edith. I'm so proud. I'm proud of you and the whole Solo team. I know how passionate. I know how hard you work, and the good news is I think the community appreciates it, right?
Yeah, hope so.
Such good stuff going on there.
I mean,
that's
honestly,
fantastic.
You mentioned something about people doing it for money, and honestly, we're doing it because we're having a blast. I mean, this is the only thing that I can say on Solo is like, is that we really, everybody's there, right? It's like we just having a blast. That's what we wanted to do. We want to do it. We don't want to be limited about, other constraint, and we're just doing it. So we're really excited
Good.
about it.
Just do it. Another company used that one already. Just do it.
But it's okay.
You're doing it. Hey man, I'm really happy for you. I'm happy for the whole Solo team. SoloConf is SoloCon is the 8th. Check it out, solocon.com.
Go check out some of these.
Excuse me, solocon.io. It's solo.io is the company. SoloCon is oso.io?
Yes.
Okay.
So make sure we got it right. And go check out some of these hot new releases from the Solo team. Great to see you. I hope to see you in person soon, maybe at an event.
Yes, KubeCon maybe.
Maybe. Yeah, I'm going to try in Spain.
Yes, I will be there.
Yeah, I think everyone's trying to go there. All right, this is Alan Schimmel for Techstrong TV. We're going to take a break. We'll be right back.
SecurityBoulevard.com is the leading resource for news, analysis, and education on challenges facing the cybersecurity industry. SecurityBoulevard.com covers all aspects of cybersecurity, including data security, DevSecOps, cloud security, application security, network security, security threats, and more. SecurityBoulevard.com has the largest selection of security content, featuring breaking news, blog posts, podcasts, and more. Visit www.securityboulevard.com to learn more. SecurityBoulevard.com, home of Security Bloggers Network.
And we are back. Next up, Alan is speaking with Chris Wysopal, who is the co-founder and CTO over at Veracode. Chris and Alan discuss a couple of different things, including Veracode's continued growth and the recent state of enterprise software survey that they just recently put out, some of the results from that. And they're also talking about some of the general market conditions around application security. Great conversation. Let's roll it now.
This is Digital Anarchist.
Hey everyone, welcome to another Techstrong TV segment. I'm really happy to be joined by my friend Chris Wysopal, one of the Chris's from Veracode. I think it was just 2 or 3 weeks ago we had Chris Eng on talking about this year's Veracode State of Security Survey. Chris is now going to give us, Chris W. is going to give us a little bit more insight into the state of Veracode rather than the whole state of security. Hey, Chris, welcome back to Techstrong TV. You look well. Hope everything's good.
Yeah. Hi, Alan. It's good to be on your show again here. It's always great to talk with you.
Absolutely. So let's talk. You know, what's the old Irish proverb? May you live in interesting times. It's certainly been interesting times. No sooner do we start thinking this pandemic might finally be going. We have a land war in Europe for the first time in 70 or so years. And it's crazy. But, you know, security marches on, right? Mm-hmm. As I said, in the outset, you were going to give us maybe a little bit of the State of the Union. Apropos, we're recording this I think the day that
the day of the State of the Union, right?
Yeah. So you're going to give us a little Veracode State of the Union. Why don't we start there?
Yeah, sure. So you mentioned the State of Software Security report. We come out with that every year. Veracode is part of this application security community, part of how people are securing software. So a lot of the things we see in that report, obviously it's from Veracode's vantage point, but I feel like we're part of a larger, we're part of a larger whole, and we just see more people doing application security, more people, more organizations covering more applications, doing it with multiple tools, not just using just static or just dynamic, but both software composition analysis. So we're just seeing, the state of what we're doing at Veracode reflect these trends of using multiple tools, covering more apps, building it more into your SDLC, and we get to see those. Those data points come out from that report. So I have to say that Veracode's doing well because AppSec is doing well. Organizations are really getting a handle on how to do this well by building it into their SDLC. shifting left right into the developers' IDEs and into the build systems, into continuous integration systems, not waiting to the end. All those things that we used to talk about, like this is the best practice. We actually see, organizations doing it. Same thing with open source. Open source usage in software development has continued to grow year after year. But the other thing we're seeing is companies are making better decisions around the open source they're using. So they're using software composition analysis. They're understanding what open source they're using and the risk in it. And they're making better decisions about which libraries to choose and also keeping those updated. I talked about the State of Software Security report. A great data point about that is 3 years ago, when we looked at the open source, the average enterprise application was using 31% of the libraries they were using had a known vulnerability in it. Fast forward to 2021, when we captured our data, and only 10% of those libraries being used have vulnerabilities in them. So it just shows that people are just making great progress in reducing risk, and the tools are actually working, and people are making good decisions.
Absolutely, and that's good news for us all. Chris, there's a lot here I want to jump in on. Let me first of all start off by saying, absolutely, app security has grown by leaps and bounds in terms of adoption in the broad market, right? It's reached critical mass where, it's not just more normal than not, but it's the best practice to do so, and then overwhelmingly. But, taking away your modesty, the rising tide has lifted all the boats, but Vericode's boats lifted probably a little higher than some of the others. And it's not that you were at a higher point to begin with, though maybe Vericode was, but certainly Vericode has been one of those companies that have led this, not revolution, but has led this golden age, if you will, of application security, right? Where it really is now mainstream, where it really is, the way things get done.
Yeah, I think early on, I was actually just talking to people on Twitter today about, the argument of should I use a SaaS tool or a DaaS tool? Like I was hearing that argument yesterday. And of course, the answer is both. And we made that decision to become a multi-tool company back in 2008. So you see a lot of companies start in one place and then they add another testing technique to cover more types of application risk that can only really be found using different techniques. And, so having multiple tools to cover multiple scenarios of testing and multiple, parts of the application is something that we chose early on. And, we see with our data that I think our data last showed that, over the last 3 years, there's been a 31% increase of our customers using multiple tools from a single tool. So I think that's an example of, we kind of got in early and said, you need multiple tools. And that has helped us grow because someone will, understand dynamic, they'll know it, they'll want to use that kind of tool. And then when they move to say, okay, well, now you got to do software composition analysis, Vericode has a great software composition analysis tool. So I think the multi-technology approach, putting it together in a platform where you can have unified policies and reporting and analytics across all of that, as opposed to cobbling together lots of different things, has helped us grow when the trend of the industry is, say, to use multiple tools. And the trend is not to just cover, single digits or tens of apps, but literally hundreds of apps. Now you need some way to govern a program that has you're scanning apps from hundreds of teams, and that's where the policies and reporting across a large organization comes in. So I think we were always sort of targeted towards like where is application security going to be as it matures? So as it's matured, we really, benefit from that.
Absolutely. Chris, you also mentioned software composition analysis, SCA.
Yeah.
And you said, there's been a lot of growth in it. Well, there wasn't any software composition analysis in 2008, really. I mean, there wasn't sort of this dedicated open source, what version of the tool, of the open source you're using, and so forth. And certainly, again, you can't make wine before it's time. It doesn't pay to get crazy with software composition analysis tools unless open source components are a big part of the applications you're scanning. So, when you didn't have that, well, of course you didn't need SCA. But as the percentage of open source components, or the percentage of code in applications are open source, modules, if you will, or components, has continued to rise, we needed something that tested for that, right? And it's given rise to this whole, there was the SAS, the DAS, the IaaS, or IaaS, and now SCA is on equal footing with them.
Oh, absolutely. I think that, Heartbleed was the big wake up call that you could have this critical vulnerability in your organization from an open source library you used. I think that was the big wake up call. But the one that really pushed everyone to want to do this was the Struts 2 vulnerability that hit Equifax.
Yep.
And everyone was like, oh no, like we could lose hundreds of millions of dollars if we don't manage it properly, right? That was a situation where, they knew they were using it. They just didn't figure out all the places they were and patch them in a timely way because they just didn't have the right information and the right process. That was a huge inflection point. And I think Log4j is obviously the latest inflection point, but I think we've already arrived with SCA being a peer with things like static and dynamic analysis as far as an AppSec program goes. I would even recommend, before doing static and dynamic, add SCA if you're doing dynamic or just static, because it's like you say, it's when there's a huge percentage of your app is made up of open source libraries, that's where your risk is. And our latest State of Software Security report, we looked at the percentage for different languages, and Java being the most mature language and also the most mature open source library ecosystem, 97% of the average Java app is libraries, which is absolutely crazy because it's such a rich ecosystem. People are just writing business logic, right? No one's writing, rendering stuff to screens or sorting or cryptography.
But to be fair, why should they?
No, it's already been done.
Why would you reinvent the wheel?
Why would you write a logging utility, right? Just put in Log4j, right?
Well, so that's a good segue into the next thing I wanted to talk about, which is supply chain.
Yeah.
Right? So the downside of it is, and we learned this in the real world with, personal health equipment, masks. When all of your masks come from China and China can't get you masks, you don't have any masks when you need them. If all of your, logging functionality is provided by one app and that app all of a sudden has a bad vulnerability or a design flaw, whatever you want to call it, you don't have alternatives. And so I think there's a balance between relying on one provider or one solution versus having to reinvent the wheel over and over. I guess in a perfect world, I'd want several good logging, solutions at my fingertips.
Yeah, well, this is the old argument of sort of the, having an operating system monoculture versus having multiple.
Yeah, that's exactly right.
Operating systems, which back in my at stake days, damn gear got into some trouble for writing a paper talking about how it's actually a national security risk that the government is
I remember the paper.
A single. Now that's less so today because Linux has really blossomed, and there's lots of different flavors of Linux too. And of course, Microsoft has gotten a lot better in security than from when that paper was written. But it is that argument, like, do you put all your eggs in one basket and really guard that basket? Or you distribute your eggs around and maybe lose one egg, but don't lose the whole basket. It's an age-old risk trade-off that we have in information security. I think one of the things that, having multiple versions of stuff, I find problematic because it's harder to manage and people can move laterally really well. They're not just taking the one egg, they're taking the one egg and they're finding their way to the other eggs. So, I still think, having one, logging utility that you rely on is okay, as long as you pick a good one, the project is well managed, up to date, they respond quickly. There's people there to fix flaws when they're reported. And you have a system that you can upgrade quickly. So yeah, I think that is that all eggs in one basket, but you just got to pick a good basket and guard it well.
So in real life, IRL, right?
Yeah.
That choice is made by the market. Sort of the market decides what's the best solution, and hopefully they're taking, these factors that you're mentioning into account, right? It's not just that it's free or it's easy or it's what everyone else is using. In some cases, it is what everyone else is using. But, people are investigating, is the project well maintained? Do they update it often? Is there someone there, when you got to pull the fire alarm at 3 a.m. or whatever? But with other people, and I think with a lot of software, it's, this is the most popular one. That's what we're using. And I don't know if they investigate beyond that.
So there is some work going on in the OSSF, the Open Source Security Foundation, around, measuring project health and publishing that, but also measuring. I think there's a census coming out today on the most popular open source libraries that Harvard's been working on. So that OSSF can give funding and support to the most popular projects, right? You don't want to, if something that was the problem with Heartbleed. We all woke up and realized we were all dependent on this library that there were two people maintaining. Right. And so that we're trying to not have that problem happen again, that identify those projects that are widely used and we're widely dependent on, that are under-resourced, make people aware of that so they can move off of it if they want to, but also give them funding, because we know a lot of people, it's the set it and forget it mentality. If it works, you don't need to fix it. So I think more information and more resources for the critical projects will really help that. So I think we're really making some good progress in this ecosystem.
Yeah. No, I personally have high hopes for this OSSF. I think if the industry gets behind it in the right way, it's really something we need. We can't talk about supply chain and open source, though, without mentioning SBOMs, right? That's it's a big word out here for everyone today. And the software bill of materials. I don't know. Maybe you color me stupid, but I'm thinking there should be like a Veracode product that either I have to manually enter or can somehow automate, what are the third-party components in my app and spit out an SBOM for me.
No, absolutely. No, absolutely. So we're going to be supporting the SBOM formats that I think it's the I forget which NTIA has come up with, and the Cyclone DX format, because we think it's super important that our customers that are software vendors can use our SCA product and then have the requisite SBOM to show their customers. And this is something that is it's a hard customer requirement. Our customers need this because if they sell into the federal government, very shortly, that's going to become a requirement. It is specified in the executive order. So if you're selling software to the federal government, you have to deliver it with an SBOM. And the thing that's really great about the executive order is there's a lot of things in there that, of course, will make the government more secure, but it's going to help the whole ecosystem be more secure. Because if a vendor has to supply this to the federal government, that means other customers can ask for it too. And I think a lot of it will just be made public. So the SBOM will be publicly available. So that's another good example of using supply chain security to improve the whole ecosystem. If there's one consumer that's really demanding from their suppliers, that will help all of us. And I think that's what the federal government is doing.
Excellent. Let me, because we're over time already, but I feel like I took you down this way and I went off our thing. So, all of this is, of course, made for good times at Veracode in terms of revenue and growth and all that. And that's manifested itself. You guys have expanded into some new markets, right? You want to talk about that?
Yeah. So over the last couple of years, we finally made the final push, and we're 100% in the cloud. We've always had some stuff in the cloud, as a SaaS company for, I think, 6 or 7 years. But, we started off as a data center company, a SaaS company, because the cloud didn't exist when I started Veracode. But now we're 100% in the cloud. It gives us great advantage to scale up. The other thing it makes it easy to do is make other instances, right? We're up in AWS. We now have an EU region. We have a GovCloud region. And this has allowed us to expand more fully into the EU, where a lot of organizations have data residency concerns. And it allowed us to expand our government business, our federal government business, and hopefully soon the state government business. I learned recently there's a state ramp that piggybacks off of FedRAMP, so state governments can feel confident in the SaaS solution is meeting the federal requirements. So all that's expanded the market. It shows that the market's really expanding. It's really a global market. And I think the federal and state and local government market is also expanding, which is great because we all use applications that are come from other countries, and they all come from our local and state governments too.
I recently saw an article. Why in this great resignation era and people moving out of cities and so forth, what makes for a good place to live? Well, there's the crime rate, the cost of living, the usual suspects. But another element is how easy does the government make? Like, how often do you got to go to DMV where you live, right? Or how much of DMV is online?
Everything's online. They mail you your license renewal, et cetera.
Yeah. But there are local governments where you can't do that. You still have to go to the DMV, and we all know what fun that is. But, and that's small potatoes, right? Voter registration, everything else, taxes, jury duty, everything. The amount of applications that local governments are in need of and are developing is huge. It's just a huge market. Of course, the federal, it tends to be higher dollars concentrated in one project, where in the state and locals it can be somewhat, like herding cats. But it's a huge opportunity, huge market as well. And it's also, though, ripe for, we got to make sure it's done right, securely.
No, absolutely, because you can choose what retailer or media company or whatever you want to, but you can't really choose your local or state government, right? Unless you move. So you have to deal with it. So, and they have sensitive personal information, right? So it's really important, and it's really good to see that state and large city governments are really getting behind application security. I'm pretty excited about that.
Cool stuff. Hey, Chris, we're way over time. But for people who want to find out more about Veracode, it's veracode.com, right? VERACODE.
That's right. And I would, it's linked off our homepage, but check out our State of Software Security report for, insights on the whole AppSec industry.
Absolutely. Hey, it's good seeing you. As I said off camera, I'm hoping to see you at RSA in San Francisco in June. Maybe Black Hat or somewhere in summer, if not in Vegas. But hopefully we're getting back to in person. We don't have to do these over Zoom all the time.
I'm planning on going to both. We'll see what happens.
Me too, but fingers crossed. Hey, say hello to all our friends at Veracode. Good luck, man. Good job at Veracode, Chris.
Thanks, Alan.
All aside. Good stuff, man. Chris Weisfeld.
Appreciate talking to you.
Appreciate you, man. Co-founder of Veracode here on Techstrong TV. We're going to be right back. We'll be back in a moment.
ContainerJournal.com is the leading online destination for centralized computing-related content. ContainerJournal.com covers all aspects of software containers, from container management, data management for containers, container security, networking for containers, to the entire container ecosystem, Kubernetes, microservices, serverless, and more. ContainerJournal.com has the largest selection of container-related news, featuring breaking news, blog posts, podcasts, and more. Visit www.containerjournal.com to learn more.
All right, we are back. Next up, we've got the Haunted Hacker podcast. This is part 2 of a 2-part conversation that Mike Jones has with Ken Underhill, who's with CyberLife. They talk about a number of things related to cybersecurity and related to Ken Underhill, including his story, his mental health, and how important it is to get help when you need it, as well as really what is life like for Ken Underhill, what it's like being him. It's a great, great conversation. Let's go ahead and roll it now.
I still deal with that. For those out there dealing with imposter syndrome, I still deal with that every single day. In fact, when I create courses even, I feel like a total imposter. And then what happens though, is people will take the course and be like, oh my God, it's the greatest thing ever. And I have to take a pause to myself and be like, oh yeah, it is, isn't it? Yeah. Right. So you're always going to deal with imposter syndrome is the other thing I'll say, because the people have such a tendency to compare themselves, right, with
to other people.
Yeah. And even on social media, right? Like you see all these people getting LinkedIn's terrible because you see this and you're like, shit, man, I'm not doing anything with my life. Like you're like, God, I'm not even doing this, right? You see people getting 97 certs and 46 college degrees and all these things, and they're taking selfies from Bermuda or whatever. I don't know. Hopefully not the Bermuda Triangle. Yeah. But like you're like, come on, man. Like who does all this? And people do it, but burnout is a real thing. Burnout is a real thing. Burnout, there's a lot of, I think it's called functioning depression. I didn't even realize that till someone I really respect recently that lost their family member tragically, suicide. Until they mentioned that term, I hadn't heard it. And I was like, shit, I mean, I've been a functioning depression dude for years. Like I didn't even realize the terminology because I've never been, officially diagnosed because I refuse because then I'll just get pills and I'm not going to take your pills.
So, makes it all better.
Yeah, right. I refuse to take your pills. I don't even take vitamins. I'm like, let me just eat broccoli and stuff. Like, why would I don't need to take a vitamin? Just let me eat healthier. Come on. Simple. Smoothie. Exactly. But long story short, I mean, mental health is important. It's sometimes a topic that people don't want to talk about. There's a lot of narcotic and alcohol abuse in the industry. Like I'm just going to say it. There's a ton of it. And I want you to know, if you're someone that listening to this right now that has issues like that, understand you're not alone. And the other thing I'll say is don't hesitate to reach out for help, even if it's just talking. I've found oftentimes in life, it's easier to talk to like a total stranger than it is to talk to someone right? Because a stranger is just going to listen. They're going to listen. They're going to listen to you. That's why, they got hotlines and stuff, right? For suicide hotlines and stuff. Just listen to you. They're not going to be like, well, what about this or that? You should have did this, should have did that. They're just going to shut up and listen to you. And oftentimes just talking about it a little bit, especially as a man, like there's a cliche, like your mental health, you should, you gotta be a tough manly man. Listen, I'm a tough manly man. I can assure you from my service record, I'm a tough manly man. Cool. I still talk about mental health. I'm still human. Still human. I'm not a crier, so I don't cry. Now Beyonce songs get to you, but aside from that, I'm not a crier. It's just me naturally, though, right? I'm just not naturally a crier. Some people are, and that's totally fine. As male, female, however we're not binary here, so however you gender identify. It's okay to cry. It's okay to let out that human emotion side. You don't have to be a robot, even though you work in tech. You don't want to be a robot. But the biggest thing I want anyone listening to take away from this is there is help out there. There's a lot of organizations. There's a lot of people that all you have to do is ask, because I don't know what's going on in Mike's head right now, right? He could be like, this damn cat, that might be what he's thinking.
Close.
yeah, right? So I have no idea. But if he reached out to me and said, hey, man, I'm having a rough week, dude, let's get on a call. I don't care if it's midnight. Like, we're going to figure out a time that works. We'll get on that call. Let's just talk through it. Sometimes it's just talking through it with someone else that's been through some stuff in their life that helps you, understand things, So
yeah, last year was a tough year.
I
know that we probably have a lot of mutual connections. I lost 3 people in the industry last year to suicide. One, I had absolutely no clue. He had talked to me, like, when I got back to the States, I was in a really bad place. I'd been overseas and kind of exiled from my own country for a couple of years. Got back and had nothing, had no job, had no place to live, had nothing. And I was in a really low spot trying to figure out, where's my place in life? Do I go back to what I was doing and speaking and cyber and all that good stuff, or do I just quit? And I was just like really like at that point where I felt like I had no value, and I felt like I had lost everything, like completely everything. And which wasn't the case. All I had to do was reach out and get back on the networks and connect with the people that I normally connect with in order to see that wasn't gone. But in my mind, a situation like that can take it over. And so I reached out, and this guy reached out to me from Austin, Texas. And he was former military as well, and kind of helped me through it, and gave me that motivation to be like, I can do this. You can lose everything and come back. And what was sad was, after helping me out through that, he went through the same thing, but he didn't reach out and ended up committing suicide. And that was really hard to take, because here was a guy that helped me through probably the worst time of my life. But nobody could reach out to him because nobody knew. And I felt kind of robbed in a way. I felt like I should have been able to try to help, but I had no idea. And you never want to pry, because you don't know if what the situation is. And from the external view, everything looked fine. Everything looked great. And as men, I think we have a tendency to do that. I think when we're struggling up here, we focus even more on making this look like everything's great, everything's fine.
Yep.
But yeah, it's definitely a poison in our industry. I think depression and stuff like that, because and another thing I think that leads up to it is the people in our industry and what we do requires sometimes a different type of brain that may be wired just a little bit different. And may not work as well in social situations as most people's. And there's a lot of self-doubt. There's a lot of, like you say, imposter syndrome, which I deal with daily. And I was just talking about earlier. I was like, I look at where I've been, and I look at things on LinkedIn. I look at the videos, and I look at the conferences I spoke at, and I'm like, why do people want to hear what I have to say? Am I really qualified to tell these people how to look at things? But I think that our mind is a very complex object. It's more like a computer, like a CPU. And when things start going awry, if you don't reach out, that firmware is going to get fucked. And you need somebody to help you reboot that. So yeah, I definitely stress, like you said, if people are listening that are dealing with that in the industry, a lot of us have been through it and have like really struggled. So reach out, stuff. So
yeah, I think one other thing I'll just kind of tack onto that a little bit, because it may or may not be appropriate. We'll see, but I think you mentioned it when you're looking at kind of, okay, here's these videos and things that I've done of conferences and things like that. I think oftentimes, and I'm the same way. Like I've on paper, right? People see the novel of Ken, they're like, holy shit, like this dude, right? He's done all these things.
Impressive.
Yeah, well, yeah, but for me, I'm still just Ken, right? I'm still Ken that, and not to associate myself with, like living in a trailer, but like I'm still Ken that is this literally the same guy growing up. It's just now people seem to want to hang with me. Back then, oh, you're poor, you scum, all these things.
Right.
Now it's like, oh, it's, he's like one of the popular kids, whatever. It's tough, and I do the same thing. Like I don't like, I have a lot of friends that, like, if I name drop, they are literally celebrities that people like, oh my God, right?
Right.
You have access to them? Can you give me an autograph? That's usually the first question. But like, for me, I've never, I guess it's kind of weird because I've never had that mindset. And this will all make sense hopefully in a minute. If not, it's total confusion, and that's okay. Chaos. But I've never had the mindset of like, oh wow, look at all of these, people or ththese compliments. Like I've never like registered my mind like that of like, ooh wow, look at this, right? Like it, with celebrities or whom have you, I'm always just like, cool, hey, how you doing, Mike? Right? And I'm the same way about myself. Like, all the things I've accomplished, I'm just like, hey, how y'all doing, right? And people, the reason I bring that up is because I think a lot of times we don't take a minute to love ourselves.
Right.
We don't, I have like, I started like an I Love Me book back in the military, but then I don't know where I ever put that thing. But I do have kind of an I Love Me stuff around here. I kind of put things in a pile, if you will. So for all the like organized people out there, they're going to be freaking out. Oh my God, a pile of stuff. But it's a pile of assorted things, but it's like different accomplishments, right? Like trademarks and these things that I've done myself without attorneys and all, like my patent stuff and all these different things, right? But for me, I had to force myself is one thing I'm going to say here. For those that out there that are doing a lot of things and you don't register it, like myself or Mike, you're kind of like, why the hell are people caring what I have to say? You have to force yourself to look at the things and just kind of take a pause. And that might be once a week, it could be a daily thing, depending on what you need. It could be once a year or something. But I typically do it just whenever I feel like I need it. Mm-hmm. I just take a pause and I say, okay, kid called trailer trash all the damn time. Let me look through this pile. Oh my gosh, look at what this kid has done just so far in his life. And he's got a lot of life left. Yep. That's one kick-ass kid right there, And of course, now I'm a grown man. But if I shave, I look like I'm 12 still, so it's all good. But, I think, for those out there that are kind of facing a similar struggle, right, where you're just kind of like, what the hell, why do people care about me? I'm just Mike, I'm just Ken, whatever. I think you have to force it upon yourself in a way and just say, okay, it could just be a collage of pictures of things you've done or whatever, but just like, you got to take that pause mentally and say, I started here in life and now I'm here. And these are all the things I've done, and just really pat yourself on the back, man. You got to be selfish. That's the other thing I've started in 2022. I am a selfish bastard this year. I'll tell you that right now, man. I'm a selfish bastard. Not saying I'm not going to help people, but like I started totally cutting away all sorts of time. Like I'm very selective on like, podcasts and things I go on these days because I'm like, I unfortunately just don't have enough time for Ken.
Well, I appreciate you made time for this one.
Well, dude, you said Mike invited me, all of you, and I was like, oh my God. I threw the cat in the trash. I was like, get out of here. I got to get this done. But, I'm just more mindful of my time because I'm like, look, and it's usually like when I lose a close friend, a suicide thing, I of course, reflect. And you're like, shit, life's short. So for me, I made a commitment because I'm involved in a lot of things. So I've started really carving things back. I closed down a couple companies, sold off, things. And I did that because I was planning for 2022 to not be like a lazy year, but more of, like, let me get my life back, so to speak, right? Let me just slow down. It's okay to slow down. It's okay for me not to go get 900 certs, because I personally don't give a crap about certifications or college degrees. I only did it because I had Army money to use. That's why I got, the Masters of Western Governors and the undergrad and stuff like that. I wasn't one of these people like, let me get a master's in cyber and try to get a job in cyber. Right. I was just like, let me get this degree because I've got money to spend. And if I don't spend it, then it's kind of lost. And I definitely put in the work to get it. So yeah, they got enough for me. They still owe me a paycheck for my last paycheck. But anyways.
Oh, ouch.
Whatever. I let it go. I was like, I could, you can spend the money to try to get that, or you just move on with life. And I'm like, I had a good time, met a lot of good people, some things I didn't like, but now I'm still alive and I can go live my life. Whereas, very, very close friends of mine can't do that. So let me go live my life for them. But really in 2022, I'm taking I'm being selfish. And I encourage everyone listening to this to be selfish. There's no reason why you cannot take some time to yourself, why you can't take an extra year to get the cert or put your college degree on pause for a year or something like that. But there's no reason why you can't do that stuff. There's no reason why you can't take a break from a cyber career, right? If you're working right now, been in for 10 years, dude, freaking do something else for 6 months or a year to explore something else. Exactly. I'll tell you what, Mike, man, video editing, which I hated, dude. I hated it for years, but man, let me tell you now, like yesterday, I spent like hours yesterday, like last night, just listening to like cartoon, like different sounds. I was like, I wonder how I could use this and that. And I love it, man. It allows me to be creative. So now I'm like exploring it. But like even just a year ago, I was like, screw video editing. Let me find someone good. I never could find anyone good to do it. So I had to do it myself. But now it's a relaxation for me. It's very therapeutic, actually. So what I'm saying with that is, for those out there, is find something that's very therapeutic for you. The other thing I do is combatives, which most people wouldn't find that therapeutic. They're like, but I find it very therapeutic. Working out is therapeutic for me, hitting the weights and stuff like that. Even just sitting outside in a freaking chair and just sitting in the breeze and battling, the 12-foot long mosquitoes in Texas. I mean, things like that are just, the simple things in life. I'm a very simple guy. I don't have, I have means these days, whereas, growing up I didn't, but I don't have Ferraris and all that crap. I don't have a big old mansion. I that's not me, right? Some people that is them, right? That's I got to have those things. I don't give a crap. Give me like a freaking rock in the middle of the woods, and I'll sit down and I'll be chilling all day long. So what long-winded thing. Sometimes I go on tangents, but long-winded way of saying, for anyone out there listening to this, find something that you actually enjoy. It doesn't have to be freaking cyber. It doesn't have to be tech. And enjoy it. I mean, I'm an avid reader. I do not like digital books. I hate audiobooks. If I love a paperback.
A book.
Too much to my wife. I have to do a cleansing every so often because I have so many shelves and so many books. And if I buy new ones and they stack up, and of course I have a spouse and she doesn't like clutter and all those things. So every so often I have to purge and send them off to a library or whatever. But find something that you genuinely enjoy, and it may be something that you've never thought of. Like I never thought I would like video editing, but I bought a course on using Adobe Premiere, and I've taken a lot of courses, by the way, over the years on Adobe Premiere. But like this one, the instructor just made it so fun. I was like, oh, that seems so cool. Yeah. And I played around. I'm like, oh, and I can do this and this and this. And now it's a whole new world for me to do video editing. And I want to get into more of the 3D stuff and all these things that I pay, Adobe for the license for all these years. But now, oh my God. Thanks, Adobe. If you're listening, lower your prices. But it's a different thing, right? And many things in life I didn't realize I would enjoy until I did them. Like even painting, I want to get more into painting. I know a lot of artists, and right now my painting is not the best. I used to actually, the paint by numbers.
Paint by number,
yeah. I mess those all up. I screw them all the way up. Totally screw them up, and that's okay because you're allowed to do that, right? It's your artwork. You can do that. But eventually, I want to get into more of that and stuff like that. So again, it doesn't have to be tech related. I see so many people like, oh, my hobby's got to be NFTs or something. Like, no, Okay. If that's what you want, great. But like, you don't have to. It's okay. If you want to do horseback riding, freaking do it. If you want to play the guitar, freaking do it. Like, you have to have an out, though. That's what I'll say. That's one of the biggest lessons I've learned over the years. You have to have some kind of an out that's preferably not technology. I know because you got to get away from your damn phone. Like, sometimes I leave my phone in the other room, forget it all day long. People are blowing it up. People are blowing up LinkedIn and stuff like that. And I'm like, oh, it was so nice. I mean, you know, we remember back in the day before we all had a phone next to our side.
But we had beepers, and that was worse.
You know how many people abuse the 911 stuff on that? Oh my God. Didn't you hate that, man? Like, you think it's urgent, you're calling, you're trying to put more quarters in the payphone to call up and see. And of course, they never answer right then. You're thinking something's going on. They're like, oh, yeah, I just want to see, you know, if you want to go out tonight for dinner.
Yep.
Dude, I'm coming to your house in an hour. You could have asked me that then, man.
So as far as like self-identity and you know, imposter syndrome and just dealing with being who you really are and not what people see, I think the biggest eye-opening experience I've had lately is going to a social platform that I've never been on before, that nobody knows me. It's not related to technology at all. And getting on there and saying who I am, but they don't believe you. And that to me was the best thing in the world, because I'm like, I don't have to be that person. I can be who I want to be, you know, and not have to worry about all that stuff. But it was really eye-opening, because 9 times out of 10, you know, you get to a certain level, people don't believe who you are or how you got there. And so it feeds into that imposter syndrome. But I think it's important to get away from technology, to get away from technology-filled platforms just for a bit, to get a taste of real life. And I call it real life because it's a life that I'm not connected to as much anymore, because of all the things that I've taken on. And I think I'm on the precipice of what you're talking about as far as like investing in myself in 2022. But I tell my analysts, and I tell everybody in industry, is to learn something new every day. Try to do something you've never done before. And it doesn't have to be related to technology. Alyssa Knight came to me last year and said, I want you to be a content writer. And I was like, I don't write. Like, I barely graduated high school. Yes, I have tons of college credits, but I hate writing. I love reading, but I hate writing. And she said, just give it a shot. And so she talked me through it. I learned Studio Binder, a platform I've never seen before, didn't understand it. And I got to see things from a different point of view. And doing that, I mean, it really made me look at, am I limiting myself to what I can potentially achieve based on who I think I need to be for other people? And I think that's a bad place to get to. I think that when you get to a certain level and people do look to you for advice, or they look to you because of your leadership in a certain technology or a certain area, I think you start to lose a little bit of self. And you want to give all of yourself to the people that are, you know, there's a demand for it. So yeah, I think that the time I had to take off when I got back to the States, because I had to start over again, was really therapeutic, because it gave me a view of myself and a way to say, okay, yes, those articles, those things, I've done that, but that's not me. You know, that's who I became, and that's what I do for a living. But like you, I'm still that kid in Texas, and I'm still that kid who played high school football and did this and did that. But technology doesn't make me who I am. You know, experiences over a period of time makes you who you are, and a little bit of your environment. But I don't think environment, to a certain extent, doesn't limit people. I mean, look at you and I. You know, we didn't come from blessed backgrounds, but with a little bit of tenacity and persistence. You know, I tell people there's certain things you have to have in cyber that other areas of, I guess, professionalism doesn't require, or not as much. And one is persistence, and the other one is tenacity. And the most important is the ability to say no and know when enough is enough. Because you can, in this industry, you can definitely get wrapped up in working 24/7. and meeting deadlines. And the hardest thing for me to understand, I still haven't mastered this yet, is turning things down. If I have a company or a group, for instance, I did a talk in Sweden last week. And, the timing, I was working, it was during the day, and I had to do this talk. But I felt like, and I really enjoyed doing the talk, and I would have done it regardless. But there are some times when someone calls me and says, "Hey, can you be up at 3:00 in the morning to speak in Singapore?" And I do it because I feel like if I don't, I'm going to lose relevance. And I think that's a really dangerous place to be sometimes, because you do run yourself thin and ragged and loss of sleep and all that good stuff. But yeah, mental health is definitely important. But I try to pick things to dive off into. I'm a big fan of art. You can't see them, but they're blurred out. I went to art school before I was in cyber. Did a lot of things before I was in cyber. I was a professional boxer. I dove off into art. But I picked up this new hobby, and I made a mistake because I picked up 3D printing. And even though it's something like a maker, I'm creating something, it's still technology. And I'm still doing calculations. I'm still looking at ambient room temperatures and how the CPU is running. And just do yourself a favor, pick up hiking or watercolor or painting or whatever. But yeah, you definitely need a break. And as far as like video editing, dude, I envy you because I try to dive off into that with this podcast and just not happening. Like I just can't do it. And so this podcast is probably one of the most amateur filmed podcasts, I guess, or content, not really content, but the way it looks and the aesthetics. And I was going to change. I was going to bring on an editor and all that good stuff. And someone told me, no. Your podcast is important because it's real talk. It's not the corporate bullshit, just let it evolve as it will. But I envy people who have like the really cool graphics and stuff. I'm like, man, one of these days I'm going to grow up and have a podcast like that.
Yeah, it's funny how easy the graphics actually are. Like when you have a good teacher, right? When you just have there's a lot of these kind of corporate trainings and stuff like that out there that like, you're just like, oh my God, why am I sitting through 10 hours of course? I just want to know how to do this one damn thing. And that's why I feel so fortunate to find the course I found, because it's like a 5 or 10 minute video. I learned how to do the one thing I'm looking to do. I don't have to look at any other parts of the course, but I do because I'm like, this is so fucking cool. Yeah. But like, I don't have to because I found the thing, I found the problem I need to solve. I will say, just kind of piggybacking off a lot of what you were saying there, for those out there listening, go with the current. Mm-hmm. And regardless of your belief pattern or whatever, just keep in your mind, go with the current. So if you think about the ocean or any body, river or whatever, actually
think about riptides. Think about riptides.
Well, yeah, riptides too. So some people may not know. Let me tell you, I was dumb enough. So there was this river near where I grew up at, and I was dumb enough as a very weak young lad, if you will, to jump right into it. And what I did is I tried to swim against the current at first, right? And so I was like literally about to drown. And a friend's girlfriend yelled out just go with the current. We'll meet you down. It'll take you to the little whatever. And I just let myself go. And as soon as I stopped fighting, it was great because it took me right to a bank. It was a little shallow and I could get right out again. But I would have died had I kept fighting the current. So where I'm getting at with that is go with the current, because right now you may be I got to learn, especially if you're trying to get in cyber, you're I got to get these certs. I got to get this degree, whatever. Go with the current, because sometimes your first job, it might be technical writing or something, right? Or it might be marketing for a cybersecurity company. It may not be you're working in a SOC or as a pen tester or whatever. Yes, you may want to do that. That's great. That's noble. Let's be realistic. Sometimes you can't get that first job that you want to get because it's not the right job, because you need to meet somebody else at that other company or in that other role. And just focus on cyber careers. You may need to meet somebody else there that then they propel you to the next level. Yep. That was much higher than the level you're trying to get at, right? So you never just go with the current. The current will always show you the next direction to go. Too many people try to fight it because they know so much. Just literally let it go. Your number one, your life will be semi less stressful. I'm not going to say it's not totally stressful.
For short periods.
Short period of time, but it just flows more naturally, right? Like the TV show, right? Like there was no thought in my head of ever having a television show ever in my entire life, and never, right? I mean, I was like, whatever. It never even crossed my mind as an option. But I knew from years ago from a mentor that said, follow the current, just go with the flow, essentially, right? That's a term for you youngins out there. We used to say, go with the flow. Now they probably have some fancy whatever. And there's probably a dance or something.
YOLO.
Yeah, there you go. YOLO. Oh, gosh. We could spend hours on that alone. By the way, don't say YOLO and jump into people's property like at a gas station, destroying it. That's not cool. That's not cool, right? It takes a long time to... I worked briefly at a pharmacy. And I was actually, so there's a lot. We could go for hours because I share a lot of stories, but I worked very briefly, and by briefly, I mean 2 weeks at a pharmacy. I won't say the name, but I worked there, and I could never, like, you would think it's so simple to stock a shelf, and set up the little things or whatever. I forget what they called it, but like, I could not do that like fast or effective. Like my brain didn't work like that. Right. So like, it would take me hours to like look at the weird ass diagram they'd have. And I'd be like, is that 3 pegs up? Is that 2? I don't understand. The boss would be coming yelling and stuff like that. I left there because they had a habit of like holding your first paycheck like for 3 months. And then they would release it. And I was like, the hell? I don't work for free. So I left there, sued them, all that stuff. Long story short. But I don't know where the hell I was going with that. But you know what? I'll turn it into a lesson. You're not going to be good at everything in life. Go with the flow. That was something where I forced the job. I'll say that. I forced, getting that job when I should have went with the current, and I would have flowed, into a better path in life. So I guess I'll spin that into a lesson. Look at that. It's magic right there.
Interesting point about that. So I mentioned riptides on the Gulf Coast, especially in Galveston. More people die from not going with the flow of the riptide, and they fight the current and they drown. But common sense says you don't fight the current. You just drift with the riptide, and then you can pull out and swim back. But yeah, a lot of people fight that and they end up dying. Funny thing about first jobs, my very first technical job, which was not technical and it nearly ended my career, was working for a software support company in Houston called Software Support Inc. Me and Jason Street actually worked at the same building and for the same company. He was a manager. I was a call center guy. And the manager came over to me one day and said, Mike, I think we have another job for you. I know this is really stressing you out, and I hear you putting people on hold and cussing them out. I don't think this is for you. And so they took me over to SegaSoft, which was a gaming company, another contract we had. And I became a beta tester for their games, looking for glitches and issues in the code. And I loved it. But sometimes the jobs you take don't necessarily turn out being your dream job or the job you necessarily want. But it's important because it helps build the things that you know you don't want to be, and helps you focus on where you might need to be. And mentors are huge. I've had such great mentors over my career. I remember the first talk I gave in front of people, and I was terrified. And Chris Roberts was a keynote, and I was in a green room with Chris, and I was pacing back and forth, and I was losing my mind. And he said, "Mate, what is wrong with you?" And I was like, I'm so nervous. Like, I can't do this. And he was like, "Dude, you'll be fine. Just go out there, talk about what you know. They're here to hear what you have to say." And I got out there, and the lights were distracting. And it was just it was tough at first, but then you kind of ease into it. And life is like that. Sometimes you get put into a new circumstance or a new job or new position, and it's very uncomfortable because it's not familiar. But if you have the right people around you and you look for that mentor and you look for those experiences to help you, you can adapt to pretty much any situation. You and I both know that from the military. Not every situation is comfortable and, easy breezy, and sometimes you have to adapt pretty quickly, but you rely on the people around you to help you do that. You have to have confidence in the people around you. But yeah, there's so many life lessons in cybersecurity and throughout my career. And I'm sure yours too as well, Ken, that, you look back and you're just amazed, like, I went through that to get here. And the universe has a very infinite way of putting people where they need to be and not exactly where they want to be. And it always works out in the end. It doesn't work out when you fight it. And that's one thing I found is your gut will tell you when things are not right for you. And that's when you need to make an adjustment. But yeah, like, it's been a fantastic conversation, Ken. And I'm sure we could go on for days. I feel like we have a lot more in common than what we know. Texas, military, medical. I mean, I'd love to have you back on and we can dive into a lot more of all of that. Because this podcast isn't necessarily about technology. It's about people and people's stories. And kind of the idea of the podcast for me was have something to record with my friends, to leave back for the new generations coming in, what it was like for us and what it was like coming into this industry before it was an industry. I'm sure you came into it at pretty much the same time. Like there was no cybersecurity. We had IT guys, and now there's a whole industry built around what we did. And I think it's important to leave that legacy behind and leave some kind of documentation so that, someone's having a hard time in their career. They're looking for that right position. This type of documentation is fantastic. In your TV show, I'd love to sit in on that and watch how that happens. Like, I'm so intrigued by any kind of media content and development. And that's kind of what got me into podcasting. I thought, hey, everybody's podcasting. It's, pandemic. Nobody's doing things face to face. So might as well give it a shot. And it literally was just going to be me talking to a camera and talking about technology. And that's all I aspired to do. And then we had people that wanted to watch as I recorded it. And it became what we have now is, full blown type of production, very amateur production. But, I get to spend time with my friends. I get to meet new people. I learn something new every day. And I encourage everybody to do it. Not necessarily podcasting, but learn something new every day and ask people, what's your story? How did you get to where you are? Because if you don't, it's going to make things a lot more complicated because you have to do it on your own. But with other people's stories, you take bits and pieces of it and build your own destiny. So with that, Ken, I'm going to ask you, do you have any questions for me or about the podcast or about the group or anything in general directed towards me or the group? Or any last thoughts before we go?
The typical questions, what's your bank account info? Just remind me again, things like that. Typical cyber questions. I think final thought, I'll just leave the audience with, or those listening, is you can do it. And just understand, depending on what goals, you set in life, you may have to put in a lot of work, a lot of sacrifice. It may take a long time. I mean, I didn't get to where I am in life overnight. I literally put in 20 plus hours every single day for a long, long time. It wasn't like I worked, for 5 minutes and, checked Facebook or LinkedIn or whatever social media and like, ooh, I'm the greatest. Nothing like that happened. There was no such thing as a 4-hour work week. That literally does not exist. It makes for a great book in sales and stuff, but the reality is that does not exist in the real world. But as long as you put in the work, if depending on the goals you set, and your goals are going to change, they're not going to be the same. They're going to keep changing. My initial goals, even going in the military, there was 2 main reasons I went in. Number 1, I was homeless, so I wanted a steady paycheck so I could not be homeless. Number 2, girls. That was my focus back then, right? So money and girls, that was it. Obviously, that's changed. The aspects as you get later in life and things like that. But just understand, whatever you're going to do, you can do it. You have everything you need within you already. Like there's nothing that I have that I've learned at university or anything like that. That's actually, I don't want to say it's never helped me, but I've had everything already within me since day one. Since I was a little tiny kid, as a baby, I came out with the umbilical cord around my neck, so I was actually dead for, I think it was like 4 or 5 minutes, whatever. So as a little baby, dead, in the hospital with this cord wrapped around my neck, choking me out, I still already had everything I needed in life to accomplish anything that I needed to. So for those out there listening, you already have everything you need. There's no course or courses and things like that, mentors, coaches that you maybe pay for. They help you accelerate things in some regard because you say, oh, okay, and it helps awaken something that's already in you to get you going there. But also life experience, does that same thing in some capacity. So again, the thing I want the audience to just I guess maybe 2 points. Number one, you already have everything you need within you. And number two, flow with the current. Do not try to resist it. Just go with the current and you'll be just fine in life.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, I appreciate it, Ken. And I look forward to more conversations with you and a friendship. And I really appreciate you being on the show. It's been a pleasure.
Yeah. Thanks for having me, Mike.
All right. Thanks. I'll see you guys next week.
CISO Talk, to hear how real-world CISOs are dealing with today's real-world issues. From enabling secure remote workers to accelerating secure cloud adoption, defending against a pandemic of security attacks and beyond. CISO Talk covers the cyber topics you want to learn about. With your hosts, Unisys CISO Matt Newfield and MediaOps CEO Alan Schimmel, featuring a revolving panel of CISO cyber experts. This is where CISOs talk. Join us on digitalanarchist.com and techstrong.tv.
All right, we are back. Next up, we've got the latest episode in our DevOps Unbound series. This one is called DevOps and Compliance Synergy, Reality or Fiction. This one has a all-star lineup of panelists, including Sonia Lawrence from Tricentis, Anna Murray from Rocket Software, Dan Kirsch from Techstrong Research, and Tim Johnson from CloudBees. They are joined by Alan and Mitch to discuss how to effectively integrate compliance as part of the DevOps process and the challenges that come with it, and so many other things related to it. So it's a great discussion. Lots of takeaways. So let's go ahead and roll it now.
Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of DevOps Unbound. DevOps Unbound is a bi-weekly video series that explores, all aspects of DevOps. We've been doing this for over a year now, and it amazes me the breadth and depth of DevOps topics that we've had a chance to dive into here on DevOps Unbound. The show is sponsored by our good friends at Tricentis, who have been our partners in bringing DevOps Unbound to you now, as I said, for more than a year, and have really, in every sense of the word, partnered with us to really explore, go where no man or woman has gone before in DevOps and really kind of look at things and take them apart. So many thanks to them for sponsoring. Welcome to our show. We have two sort of formats for DevOps Unbound. The every other week show is about 45 minutes of a pre-recorded conversation with a panel of experts. And then around once a month, we do a live roundtable of DevOps Unbound, in which the stars of the show are you, our audience. And you're invited to come on, participate in the conversation, ask questions, comment, chat with each other, and it's just a when it goes right, it's a rip-roaring conversation of 1,000 different directions, but it's a fantastic experience. I invite you to, I think the next one might be around March 15th or something, but check it out. We'll get the dates for you, but I do invite you to come to our next live roundtable as well. Anyway, let's get on with today's show, though. Today's show is about DevOps and compliance synergy, reality or fiction. I have some thoughts on this, but before we do, let me introduce you to today's all-star panel. On my screen, he's on the top left. I don't know where he is on your screen. It's my friend Tim Johnson from CloudBees. Tim, why don't you introduce yourself?
Thanks, Alan, and thanks for having me here. Yeah, as you said, Tim Johnson. I'm in product marketing at CloudBees. I've been in DevOps since about 2016, and a whole lot of years of security prior to that. So happy to be here.
Thank you, Tim. Thanks for being here. Next up, I want to introduce you to Anna Murray. Anna, if you wouldn't mind introducing yourself to the audience.
Thank you, Alan. Thanks for having me here. My name is Anna Murray, and I work for Rocket Software, recent acquisition through ASG Technologies, if you've seen me before. I've spent my career in automation. So at this point, I'm a product manager for automation technologies with Rocket Software, and I've taken teams from waterfall project management through agile transformations, and agile has grown to DevOps, and I'm passionate about automation when it comes to all of that.
Fantastic, Anna. Thanks for joining us. Next up, I want to introduce you to one of my colleagues, Dan Kirsch. Dan, if you wouldn't mind introducing yourself, telling people a little bit about you.
Thanks, Alan. I'm managing director and one of the principal analysts and co-founder of Techstrong Research. And as a recovering attorney, compliance is certainly a issue that I am is near and dear to me.
Absolutely. Our next panel member is, we're very happy to have her, Sonia Lawrence. Sonia, welcome. And maybe if you could introduce yourself to the audience.
Sure. Thank you, Alan. Hi, I'm Sonia Lawrence. I'm the head of compliance at Tricentis, and I have been in this role and working closely with DevOps actually in a couple of roles now since 2018. And before that, I'm a program manager heavily embedded with integrations and cloud operations for about 15 years. So I'm also very passionate about how to bring this to the dev team and streamline DevOps. So looking forward to it.
Excellent. Last but not least, my co-host for DevOps Unbound and business partner associate for 20 years, Mitch Ashley. Mitchell, if you wouldn't mind saying a little bit.
Yeah, Alan, what a great panel. I'm excited to hear everybody chat about this topic. And I'm CTO with the Techstrong Group and also work with Dan as part of Techstrong Research. So looking forward to us diving in.
Absolutely. And thank you, Mitchell. All right. So guys, this episode is a DevOps and compliance synergy, reality or fiction. Let me start it off with this. You know, my background is in cybersecurity. 20 plus years, Mitchell and I have worked together in it. Tim, you've been in cyber a long time too. I'll be really honest with you. One of my most hated subjects or aspects of security is compliance. I think compliance has done as much to hurt security as it's done as much to help security. It's introduced this least common denominator, lowest possible bar for security, where instead of doing what we should be doing, we're doing what the minimal needs are, checking it off, check that box, and we move on. And then we act surprised when stuff hits the fan. Now, I started DevOps.com because I thought DevOps was a godsend for security. Finally, a chance to get it right. Not to be bolted on, to be built in. And where security goes, compliance follows, right? Keeping that low bar here. And you know, the promise of DevOps, especially with compliance, even more so than security, was, my God, we could automate this. Right? If we could just automate the compliance, we don't have to worry about it anymore, and we could focus on really making secure software. Because compliance becomes sort of a byproduct of security automation in DevOps. Now, as we sit here today, we know that hasn't necessarily been the outcome. Let's leave it at that. Maybe it has been to some of you. I'm interested to hear. Don't let me bully you. Has DevOps been a good friend to compliance, or, you know, are we barking up the wrong tree? Are we chasing our tail? You know, I don't know how many dog analogies I could come up with here, but, you know, what is the deal with compliance and DevOps? Who wants to start us off?
I'll jump in, Alan. You know,
go.
You crack me up. I mean, you know, we've been hearing that for forever, and the dichotomies that we have to deal with. Can you be compliant and fast? Can you be predictable and flexible? It's like, yeah, come on, knock it off. You know, it isn't like that. But the way we're seeing it is DevOps is kind of going through this evolution of, can we just automate the pipeline, or can we get the CI part to work? And then can we automate the testing part? And, you know, so it's kind of evolutionary, and security has kind of come along. Yeah, I think about 2017, John Wellis, we did a webinar with him where he was talking about DevSecOps and saying that, you know, the sec should be silent because if you're doing it right, the security's there. And now we're coming to the next evolution, the next source of friction, if you will, is compliance. Because, okay, we're going fast, we're going secure. Somebody says, can you prove that to the regulators?
Yeah.
Right. And the way we see it is we have bank, customer of ours, has 100 people devoted full-time on a 90-day rotating basis to doing compliance work. And
sounds
they're
automated
one of the more
to me.
advanced companies are dealing with. So that's kind of a state of where we are. And from where I am, if you can't do an audit easily, you ain't running DevOps. You ain't doing DevOps right in the first place, right? So if you are compliant and you can prove it to the regulators, you're doing DevOps really well. That's my opening salvo. Back to you.
All right. I know someone else wanted to say something.
Yeah, I'm very passionate about this, definitely at Tricentis, but honestly, just anywhere. I feel like it's kind of a two-part answer right now. I think I'm finding more compliance, people in my space who understand that. And again, I come from a heavily regulated background. So for me, it's very native to say compliance isn't an afterthought. If you look at it the right way, even though it may be a low bar, it's an input. It's a set of basic requirements that if you can accommodate that upfront, there are very few surprises. And I would even extend on that and say, in the world that we're moving to in DevOps and better automated tools, where your CI/CD pipeline takes all of this into account, both for your code and your cloud environment, I really feel like it's going to start to deliver inherently secure code and infrastructure. It's just that vision and the tools are a bit lagging, right? I don't see that there are really any surprises. A couple of example frameworks, SOC 2 Type 2, ISO 27001, the objectives are clear. If you wrap that in at the beginning as a requirement, then there are very few people who, one, don't get trained as they go, and two, can't deliver it because it actually is not that hard or complex to deliver technically. So I think that part of what we're seeing is, and this is in part to me, like having been a program manager for years, Agile took and pared it down to a very lean perspective of we're looking at features first, customer needs, and typically things like encryption and administration of users was kind of an afterthought, and it's not built into the traditional Agile tools. I think that along with what Tricentis is delivering for quality, many companies are starting to respond with respect to compliance and security and putting it back at the front where I think it belongs. Because again, this is not technically difficult. It's the fact that it's basically not built into the current CI/CD tools that makes it challenging, I think, for developing teams and infrastructure teams.
Yeah, and I think what Sonia said made a lot of sense. It's also, when we talk about DevOps, we talk a lot about culture change and changes in the process as much as technology. So, if the dev team is just go, what new features have you added today? They're never going to think about compliance. But if the development team feels that they have a working relationship with a compliance team and they're working together and they understand what the compliance team needs and why they need it, not just, it's a checkbox, but it's important, and it's important for more than just our auditor to look at. That sort of merging together of collaboration between DevOps and compliance is an important aspect.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
I think part of that is some of the evolution that we're seeing in thinking, at least from the dev side, is a maturing from a bug is a bug, but it's matured into a security vulnerability is a bug, and non-compliance is now starting to be thought of as a bug. And there really aren't too many developers out there who aren't passionate about writing bugless code, right? So, but the challenge is, what is compliant? And how many standards do you have to adhere to, and how does that translate into all the different environments, all the the runtime environments, the binaries, the code, the access, and the data that you're dealing with? How do you translate all those mumbo jumbo from those regulatory standards down into being compliant with this piece of code that you're writing? That's a big challenge.
Mm-hmm. No, I agree. And especially like to that point, when I am evaluating alongside our dev teams and our product teams, tools that help augment and fill these gaps, I'm definitely very, very aware and making sure we're starting from the right baselines. There are, baselines that if you work from it is kind of that magic decoder ring to all the different frameworks you need to apply going forward from a compliance standpoint. And once that's in place, again, it just streamlines all of this for all of the teams. So it's a really important consideration in tool selection.
And now, I'm going to finally jump into the fray here, but I think that's also been part of the challenge that we've seen among people we're talking to, is that there are so many tools in place. How do you get that report so you can see what's happened and so you can reply to your auditors? And so we've really been talking to people a lot more about making sure that you have a plan that surrounds all of this, because not only do you have a lot of tools, you might be replacing one or two of them every year because there's better technology. And so you need good planned workflows that are going to work for you no matter what tools you plug and play into that workflow. And it's not an easy answer to get from here to there. And as somebody said, it is a journey for every company. And so it really does behoove the leadership to make that culture change, as Dan talked about. But it isn't just about adopting DevOps. It's about having an end-to-end plan for making sure that you're delivering that value on a consistent basis as things change around us all the time.
Agreed. To me, there's, I'm going to be just the devil's advocate today. I'm sorry. But I almost hear us saying, hey, you know what's great about this DevOps thing? We're going to make compliance the developer's problem, not the security person's problem. Right? The developers, hey, they're well paid. What the heck? But they have enough on their plate. I don't need my developer necessarily to be my tester, as I think the folks at Tricentis will clearly tell you. I don't need my developer to be my security person. I need them to be security conscious, security aware, right? But I don't need them necessarily to be a compliance expert. So therefore, if we can't develop the tools that can automate compliance as almost a byproduct of the process, and instead throw it onto the shoulders, put another straw on the camel's back of the developer, I don't know if it's successful, if it can be successful.
Yeah, agreed. The shift security left thing just really bugs the bejeebers out of me. On a couple of levels. One, like you talked about, Alan, just the burden that it puts on the developers to know more stuff, right? But there's also kind of the implication that if we do it all, shift it all to the left, all the rest of the stuff to the right of that magically takes care of itself. Well, environments can be changed, credentials can be mucked about with and stuff once the process has started. So there's two levels. Your pipeline, defined pipeline, should have that level of governance and guardrails and gates and everything else that goes along. But you still, beyond that, have to look at all the other moving parts around there and attest that everybody did what they're supposed to do. Because at the end of the day, it's folks like Sonia, or maybe Sonia's boss, who have to sign the paper that said, yay, verily, this meets our risk profile, and we can go forward.
Yeah.
Right? Somebody has that still has to be a separate thing, but you need that visibility outside of the pipeline itself to be able to see and control that.
Yeah, and to speak to that, I feel like, again, I'm going to come back to the people aspect of this challenge. One of my biggest partners at any company that I work at, especially when you start looking at the program and platform level, future state, making this inherent in design, are architects. Or I know that that's not a role that's very frequently filled at smaller companies. The group or team of leaders in the engineering org that fill that role of architect, if I can work with the architects up front, again, it becomes inherent in design. I agree, Alan. I do think it's exorbitantly way too much data or knowledge for one engineer to consume. But if you can plan, your builds for, containers or images and get things like that in place with the right team leads, a lot of this comes together as an effect where they're working within a very specific, still flexible, you can still achieve the feature and growth with customers that you need, but at least the infrastructure around them is really secure. And just like a quick data point that I have, because I've been through, I think 2 or 3 SOC, but I've looked at like the secure control framework, 70 to 75% of SOC 2 audits are about the infrastructure controls. It actually doesn't directly deal with the code that the developers are producing for the actual app. And I feel like within the industry, if that understanding were like more common and the DevOps team were really supported and they had the right tools for secure builds and really making sure they could see things before going to production that were insecure at that layer around the perimeter and with user access, I feel like most of these issues around certification and compliance, there are baselines, would actually be met more consistently. So I feel like there's also kind of a challenge right now of a lot of people look at those product engineers as that's the source, like those are the people with the root cause answer. They're the ones coding the solution. But the truth is it's your infrastructure team in the cloud. And that's really something that I've seen. On-prem is a little bit different, but it's still the same statement. You still got networks and IP and ports and perimeters to control. So I just feel like the infrastructure piece of this is typically left out. And then it becomes, unfortunately, for many companies, the tech debt when they start looking. And I've coined this phrase recently. I'm calling it, it's not a moment of realization. It's becoming a moment of terror. Because when you do get the right tools in, you can see it. Everyone steps back and says, I had no idea this is what we had built. And it takes a lot of fortitude to walk through that backlog, that tech debt.
Good. Anybody want to comment on that?
Well, yeah, I mean, I have the same feeling that you do, Alan, about DevSecOps, and we're going to have these amazing. I mean, there are a lot of amazing developers, but developers who know everything there is about security, everything there is about operations, everything there is now about compliance. It's not realistic. So instead, part of it is, I think, building guardrails. So I'm sure Sonia is working on that. What sort of data are you going to allow your developers to put into the cloud, for instance? Because at the end of the day, we're talking about data oftentimes in terms of compliance. So what kind of data are you going to allow into the cloud or out of a certain region? When you're testing applications, are you going to allow the testers to see all of the data? Probably not. I don't think you want them to see all your production data. What sort of role-based controls do you have in place? So setting those foundational guardrails, I think, is really important to keep the whole DevOps process clean and compliant.
Okay.
Yeah, I would take that a little bit further back to first principles of the and this gets into culture, this gets into cooperation, this gets into silos, this gets into doing it all right, is starting with a description. Can you describe your software delivery process? Right? If you want to call it a value stream mapping exercise, call it that. But you get everybody in the room to describe how the software moves through the system, then agree that's how it's done, and then agree on how to measure that. And then the final piece of the puzzle that I see overlooked way too often is that everybody's compensation plans or bonus structures or measurements have to be aligned on that description of what that is. Because I've seen companies where the three different groups are we're all in on DevOps, but the engineers are doing things differently, and the security folks are doing differently, and the DevOps teams are doing differently because they're measured differently. They agree in principle to doing DevOps, but because they're compensated this way and they're measured over here by something else and something else, they're never going to be as successful as they are. So if you want to make this whole process as friction-free as possible, get everybody to agree. And one of the things we've always seen in these value stream mapping exercises is somebody says, and this happens, and then somebody else immediately jumps in and says, actually, no, that's not how it works, right? And you have to get those out of the way because that's going to come back to compliance. Well, it doesn't work that way. Well, then how can we be compliant and so forth? And Anna, I think you want to jump in on there.
There's so many things to talk about, but when you guys talked, first Dan and then you, it comes back to culture. It comes back to leadership. And I think it reminds me of when we were making our transition from waterfall to agile. It's this go faster, go faster, go faster. And there's more emphasis on more faster. Go faster, go faster. Stop. Wait, slow down. We actually go slower if we don't do the right planning. And so there's absolute proof that if you plan well, you will actually go faster. And part of that planning must include your security and your compliance. The plan is to, you go back to your agile definition of done. This is done when. And part of the when is your security rules. It will pass these tests. It will go through these scanning tools. It will, whatever your definition of done is, that's how you make DevOps help you with compliance, is you first start with the right plan. And that only happens if you have cultural leadership. And like Tim said, you get everybody in the room and you agree. And so it is a big challenge. And I think more than anything, it comes back to leadership, because the people who build software love building software. They love writing code. They love delivering bug-free software. That's how they get their value, right, for themselves of what I do every day in my life. If I deliver code that gets hacked, that puts my company on the news, I'm not very happy with myself. So when you think about it, leadership can put things in place and help teams go where they need to go while putting the guardrails in. But if the leaders are not on board, you end up with this fracturing that Tim's describing.
Well, so to me, what we're describing here, though, is quality, right? No one wants to produce shoddy work, whether it's secure, insecure, compliant, incompliant. It's really, we've always strove in security to make security synonymous with quality, right? If you're delivering a quality product, and whether that's software or a guitar or whatever it is you're selling, you want to deliver quality. For many, and I'm going to put forth this, for many developers and even testers, quite frankly, and other folks in the the software development life cycle, security and certainly compliance are not quite synonymous with quality, right? Security is other to them, and compliance is other's little brother, right? But it's not quality. It's not quality. And I think that, again, that's one of the promises of DevOps, is making that quality. I'll throw just something else out here, because it's at the heart of DevOps and kind of this whole way of looking at things. Infrastructure is code. Sonia, you made an excellent point that if you set your infrastructure up right, compliance almost does become automated and easy, right? Because so much of your compliance is based on that infrastructure. But in a world where infrastructure is code, not as code, is code, right? That can be changed, that can be duplicated, that can be cloned. I mean, that was, when I first started DevOps.com, Puppet and Chef Britannia ruled the waves, right? Because you can create that same instance over and over. It's that same configuration, that gold config, right? That was rigid, it was secure, gave me compliance. That was one of the big benefits here.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. I feel like that's why it ties back in now, like at this point in the conversation, naturally to a tenet of privacy that's now becoming more and more standard in many countries. It's security by design is the expectation, right? In the world of cloud, some of that challenges, you've got a lot of options, and not everyone understands on that front how to build it securely. Like there are still a lot of base designs out there that don't necessarily have the configuration controls that maybe they could or should. That's debatable. But I feel like that's some of the challenge here is there's a huge explosion of growth in cloud environments, and the engineers who understand the secure tenets, the architects who know how to build it consistently to those standards are lagging a bit, right? They're learning too as we go. So I feel like, again, it's why these tools and going back to the understanding that if you were to look at that process, like you mentioned, Tim, like it's really important to understand the SDLC. And I recently did this just for a deck, a very simple, here's how many times you have to touch code or infrastructure if you put this up at the front in a beautiful DevSecOps environment and approach. it's one handoff, and then your security team ideally is watching for vulnerabilities. But the truth is, I think most companies end up touching code or infrastructure up to 10 to 12 times before they see the vulnerabilities to deal with them. So I feel like the more we can find the right tools to actually put this up front, or working with the architects or leads to like really build out that future state environment and build these automation points, we will continue to see this challenge. And it is very, very challenging for any one developer to account for all of that. These are many layers of expertise that we're touching on today.
One of the things, Alan, I saw a statistic last week, and I apologize, I can't remember the source. But, to your comment about infrastructure as code and repeatability, and we can get into the concept of immutable objects and, the pipeline and all that other stuff. There is a potential fallacy or vulnerability there because, yes, you are starting with that. You're using this approved component and it's repeatable. But the statistic said that only half of the controls from a regulatory standpoint actually covered infrastructure as code. So there were other things that were happening that your IAC solution or methodology or component wasn't going to see, right? So that's okay. You started well. Did you continue well, and did you end well? Is kind of the thing that you have to kind of keep along and keep in mind as you go through that.
I don't disagree. Mitchell, you've been letting people talk today. I'm interested in your thoughts.
Absolutely, got a great panel. I was just thinking about several things. One thing Zana said was talking about culture and leadership, and I've learned the hard way. Automation does not fix culture. One of the
you
toughest
can't automate
things,
culture?
No, automation doesn't solve your culture problem. And one of the hardest things to do is try to automate but across silos. That's nearly impossible. You end up with a mess. And so I think we kind of have to shed a little bit of the paradigms of thinking of these as fixed objects. Compliance is not fixed. It's constantly changing more quickly. Tim and I know this from some of our research together. Of course, DevOps is, speeding up things, Agile, speeding up things. We're changing our tool chain. So it's almost like instead of thinking about we're building a highway, it's like we're trying to do compliance for something that's constantly in motion, that is flowing by like a river. And so we have to be really good at things like understanding the changes that are happening and understanding the data that might be helpful. Maybe it's not the panacea that solves all of our problems, but the data that we're already throwing off or can capture as part of our software development process, and understanding that tool changes and lots of configurations are going to change that, whether it's infrastructure as code or, we plug in a different tool. And that's kind of the mindset we need to adopt, across whether it's compliance, security, or DevOps and software.
Yeah, might very well be. Let me defend the common man developer, common man or woman developer. As a security person, I fancy myself a security person. I am bewildered and befuddled by the amount of compliance regulations that are out there, depending where I am, who I'm talking to, and what I'm doing. How can we honestly, earnestly expect the developer to untangle this mess? I'm reminded when politicians hold up those these are the regulations we cut this year, and they slam down this big fat book of regulations that the regulations never go away. How is a developer supposed to make heads or tails of this, though? Or maybe they shouldn't, and that's DevOps' job.
Yeah, that's really the job of different tools and platforms. You sort of have to codify those compliance, those huge documents. What are the 1,500 actual requirements? What is regulation 43BC subsection R? What does it actually mean? And it means, you got to check this little thing of code. And so that's got to be automated into the platforms to make it easier, because it's just unrealistic to expect developers to understand it, but they're not paid to care about it. I mean, they're paid to put out really high quality software, and that's what you want. That's what you're paying them for. You're paying
a lot
lawyers.
of money.
You're paying people like Sonia to figure out the compliance problems, and you want the developers to put out awesome software.
But you know what, Anna, Tim, that sounds like your job. You guys got to be making products that do that. How do you do it?
I'm very difficultly avoiding a commercial for the product that I'm associated with right now. But there's other aspects to this which you haven't really talked about. Is the context of it, of whatever issue that you find, and just what the heck is the programmer or developer supposed to do about it. So there's any number of security scanning tools, DAST, YAST, BAST, BLAST, CAST, whatever, and they all come back with this storm of alerts of, "Ooh, there's these scary things happening." Developers, what the heck do I do about it? The compliance officer, like my colleague here, Sonia, says, what the heck does this mean? Because it's just as challenging for the compliance officers and the security people it is for the developers. And you use Bob's software that has some magic, some AI magic that says we determine this is a threat level of 563. What does that mean? And some other Joe's software says, oh, that's a threat level of 12. And so, and things like that. So, when you discover this, what does it mean? And what is the context of what it is that we're doing? So you look at things like, where is this in the life cycle? Yeah, it's an open connection to the internet, but this environment is a test environment and has no connection to the internet whatsoever. So do we need to panic about this? No. If it's in production, obviously, yes, but it should never get there in the first place. But also, you've got this issue, you got to be able to feed it back to the developer in the tools that they want to work with in a way that they can do something with it. So they don't necessarily have to understand you're not compliant with this particular control of CIS 12. That's, you could speak Urdu or Phoenician to them and get better result. Here's this thing. Here's what's wrong. Here's how you fix it. Go do it.
It's
right.
Anna, you're. What about you?
I echo what Tim says. Right. You have to have it. It has to be clearly defined back to the developer. Where is there a hole? We recently were looking at something ourselves that we had found a problem, and okay, wait, does it affect this? Does it even matter? Right? First, you have to evaluate it, and it does matter most of the time, right? But you have to have your architects in play. Your architects, I think, as Sonia said, she doesn't even meet with some titles called architect. You don't have somebody at that level. You don't have anybody who can look at the whole product and say whether, what the threat level is because of your product and what it's meant for. Right. And the access that can be to that software to cause a problem. Right. So that's where you really have to have those people that are at the architect level, whether that's their title or not, and they're interfacing with your compliance people and understanding the things that need to be architected in. And you have to have standards. You have to have them codified into your tools. And we're scanning and we choose to use this solution from CloudBees or that solution from Rocket. And we're going to do make sure that we meet this threat level that's defined by that product, and then your compliance people review it and decide whether it's good enough or not. And if it's not, up your game, but automate it, give the reports back, and you better hope those reports, as Tim said, tell the developer what's going on, because really these things change all the time, and our developers are good at writing code and making software work, and they can make it work the way we want it to, given the requirements. And that comes back to giving them clear requirements. We cannot ask them to do more than that. We want them to be creative, building whatever it is that they're building. and we give them requirements to fit. And if we're not, from leadership and architect and compliance, then we're failing, not them.
Yeah, I completely agree. And I would like to add to that. For me, I have seen some organizations where compliance will walk into any design meeting and say, here's my list of 200 requirements or regulations or whatever their source is, right, for their input. And I really would challenge any security or compliance professional, especially in a leadership role, to really think in terms of make it simple, make it accessible. It is not hard for developers to understand, like, data is what we're protecting, right? It's kind of like you're building a fortress around your gold as a dragon. And from there, think about it in terms of what you're protecting. It's the perimeter. It's who has access to it. It's, you know, principles of least privilege. And so I feel like approaching the development team to help them, you know, come up to speed and not terrify them with too many details is the right way to go. And it just changes the culture. It shifts naturally because they do understand these principles and they do want to deliver quality code that doesn't have these types of issues, both for security and for compliance. So I feel like there's definitely a lot of improvement in this space for training too, you know, really explaining as you go why it matters, and then making sure you're working at the right level, you know, finding those leaders in the engineering side to partner with.
Yeah.
So,
training around. I'm sorry, go ahead, Tim.
Well, I was gonna jump back in. You know, on that standpoint, you know, we're talking about the developers, we're talking about, you know, a number of people, but, you know, part of this equation is the leadership of the organization. And you talked about, Alan, you talked about quality, and it is quality enough of a incentive for upper management to really get behind compliance efforts and security efforts. And I would argue that no, it's not. Typically, it's kind of a nice to have. And I remember a statistic we had from a couple of years ago where managers said they'd rather go fast than secure. I mean, it's like, this was only like 3-4 years ago. That's scary. I hope it's changed. But the one of the things in talking with some of our customers and prospects in the last 6-7 months is the concept of a tax. The compliance tax is one customer actually used that phrase. And we go back to this bank that I mentioned earlier. That's 100 people year round devoted to doing that. What is your fully burdened cost of that labor to do zero value add work? Right? Compliance is something you have to have, but it doesn't add any value to the organization whatsoever until you don't have it in a big way. Then it takes a lot of value off. But that's kind of funny money because you're going to pay them for anyway. But if you also add in the concept of what should they be doing in terms of technical debt, or the opportunity cost of them spending this time on zero value add work versus value add. So you take that fully burdened cost, what are they expected to return? So if your fully burdened cost is $100,000, I think the company wants you to generate more than $100,000 in value in a year. Maybe it's 200,000. Maybe it's total revenue divided by total employees. There's some figure that's more than what you're paying them for. And you add that into the equation of these 100 people doing this work, that's the labor cost. Then here's what we're missing. Here's the value to the organization we're missing from that. Then you get a much more comprehensive picture of the true cost to the organization and how to justify the efforts of changing culture, doing those meetings that nobody wants to go to, and putting in different metrics and things like that, because you have a measurable impact that you can have on the organization. Because if you take a snapshot at day one and then 6 months later, you have the people doing compliance, you've got a defendable metric to take to senior management and say, this is what we're doing.
Yeah. I mean, being able to actually show compliance is, you know, it's a little different than being able to actually show security, where if you did good, no one knows, because that means you didn't have an incident, right? But with compliance, you could say, hey, look, I'm compliant with SOC, I'm compliant with PCI, whatever it is, GDPR, whatever you're compliant with. It's much, you could hold that up. Anyway, team, panel, we're overtime here. I knew this was going to be one of those sessions where we ran over. For me, it's a very volatile subject. Sonia, as the true compliance person, not making a product around compliance or anything like that, but really where the rubber meets the road, I was going to give you the last word today.
On today's show, to leave with our audience in dealing with compliance and DevOps.
Yeah, absolutely. I think just to summarize a lot of what I've heard here today and what I'm trying to really make sure we're influencing, embodying within Tricentis, it's, that true realization that along with leadership, compliance is absolutely an important part of the team. And when done well and when done from the right approach with whatever tools you're working from, you start with what you have, you identify the challenges and you get better. I mean, a lot of this boils down to knowing your requirements, following a pretty classic Deming cycle: plan, do, check, act. And I feel like those tenets really have never changed. And I just hope that more organizations really start to add this back into the agile development environments that we all have. So I think it's very achievable and the tools are catching up quickly to get us there.
Excellent. Well, Tim, Dan, Anna, Sonia, Mitchell, thanks for being on our panel in this episode of DevOps Unbound. We'll be back, as I mentioned, every other week. So in another week, or another 2 weeks, we'll be back with a fresh panel and a fresh subject on something DevOps related. But until then, many thanks to Tricentis for your sponsorship. Many thanks to you out there watching this. We appreciate your time and that you set aside to watch this, and we're grateful for it. Until then, though, this is Alan Schimmel for Techstrong TV, DevOps Unbound. Have a great day, everyone.
Looking for a live conference focused on the tools, technologies, and practices most important to your business? Innotech conferences are live one-day business and technology conferences highlighting the latest in trends for IT leaders, developers, and IT professionals. Each event combines education, innovation, peer-to-peer networking, and the latest technology and business solutions for a diverse IT-focused audience. Innotech conferences occur throughout the year in strategic regional locations, bringing together technology professionals from various industries to learn about the solutions, practices, and tools impacting their day-to-day work and gain insight into what's to come. Presenters at Innotech conferences are selected and curated to ensure each session provides the most up-to-date and relevant information without any hype. Whether you're interested in digital transformation, cybersecurity, cloud, IT leadership, or DevOps, Innotech conferences deliver. 2022 events are scheduled to be held in Austin, Dallas, Oklahoma City, Houston, and Washington, D.C. Innotech conferences are produced by Techstrong Live and powered by Techstrong Group.
All right, welcome back, everybody. Next up, we've got our Something Old segment. This is from the Predict 2022 event. This is a presentation by Ori Inbar, who's the CEO of Augmented World Expo. He has a fantastic presentation called Envisioning the Impact of Spatial Computing, aka the Metaverse, on Our Lives by 2030. And it is what the title says it is, a great look at how spatial computing or the Metaverse is going to impact our lives, the way we work, the way we communicate and interact with people, the way we live, and it's really all about the technology. So it is a great presentation. Let's go ahead and roll it now.
Hey everybody, thank you for joining my talk, and many thanks to the Predict team for the opportunity to speak with you today about how AR and VR will impact our lives by 2030. Augmented reality and virtual reality, collectively known as XR or spatial computing, are the technologies that power the metaverse. Its promise is to change how we interact with computers, how we interact with the world, and how we interact with each other. And according to analysts, it could reach an astonishing $1 trillion market by 2030. But why? What's the point? What will humanity gain when everyone uses spatial computing? Stick around and you'll find out in this session, Envisioning a Spatial New World of 2030. My name is Orion Barr, and since I started working in this field 15 years ago, my mission has been to bring this powerful technology to the mainstream. In 2008, I founded an AR startup that later was acquired by Apple, and also started AWE, a community to help the XR industry accelerate and move forward. And during this time, I had the privilege to mentor over 1,000 XR startups. And along the way, I invested in a couple dozen companies. So how are we doing? Who's using XR so far? As of the end of 2021, 1.5 billion people around the world have experienced XR on social media, playing in AR, shopping in AR, playing in VR, searching and navigating in AR, designing products in XR, and over 1 million work with smart glasses to improve their jobs every day. So yes, XR clearly entered the mainstream. But there's still a long way to go to reach every single person on Earth and change the world. What took it so long to get to this point? What were some of the biggest uphill battles facing this technology? Was it the hardware, the development tools, the user experience, the culture? These were all definitely important challenges, but the biggest one by far was generating awareness. How to get the world to recognize the potential of this technology and give it a try. Well, thanks to the metaverse craze this past year, that battle has been won. By now, everyone has at least heard about the metaverse. So what now? How can we leverage this unprecedented level of awareness? What's the goal for the next decade? And what could the world look like when this technology is fully adopted? I know predict events usually is about the near future, but in this talk, I'd like to teleport you into the year 2030 and see what could happen by then. I imagine that one day in 2030, we'll wake up and see these headlines in our local newspaper. Some of you may say this sounds like a utopia, and I wouldn't disagree. It does sound a little hopey-changey, but I think it's important to envision the positive possibilities so we can work hard to make them happen. And you probably think that some of the current use of AR and VR is frivolous. Well, yeah, after all, you got to start from the lowest hanging fruit. But with this technology, this powerful technology, we can aim much higher. Humanity is facing incredible threats to its existence. There's so much at stake. We need to think about how XR can help fight the existential crisis facing humanity, fighting diseases, fighting climate change, fighting inequality. So fasten your virtual seatbelts, set your tasers to stun, and let's get ready to teleport to a spatial new world of 2030. Your orientation session starts with an introduction to the technical foundation that powers our world. The first question on everyone's mind is, what's the form factor in 2030? How do we experience AR and VR or the metaverse? Is this what we are wearing? These bulky head-mounted displays? No way. Here are some of the latest AR glasses. They're light and good looking. Hey, no, wait, these AR glasses are actually from 2015. And even if you jump forward to the glasses of 2021, you can see some of these in my vintage collection behind me. These glasses look pretty cool. They're lighter and even more fashionable. So is this the form factor good enough for 2030? Not really. Most of these are based on waveguides technology that displays an image on a near eye display. But the smart money was betting on a different technology called direct retina projection, where a laser source scans your retina and paints an image directly on it. If this seems far-fetched to you, keep in mind that in 2022, all the ingredients were there. Companies like iWay Vision, Google, Apple, and Facebook were working on it. But since direct retina projection, or DRP, sounds kind of geeky, we prefer to use the term retpros. It rolls off the tongue, doesn't it? The point is that this tech makes our glasses indistinguishable from regular glasses, and it offers human eye resolution, indoors and outdoors, even in bright light. It also includes variable focus, and so it can replace most prescription glasses. With this form factor, it's easier to understand why everyone is wearing these in 2030, right? The retpros are complemented with sensor arrays. We wear them or embed them in our surroundings. Some even implant them, though most still prefer the option to disconnect. Biosensors understand our intentions and allow us to naturally interact with the world around us. We use our voice, eyes, hands, body, even our brain. The keyboard and mouse went the way of the BlackBerry. Scanning sensors constantly inspect everything in our vicinity and map places, objects, and people. They help us perceive shapes, textures, sounds, temperature, pressure. And in addition, specialized scanners can even identify smells, waves, particles in the air. They can see through walls and perceive any other invisible or hidden phenomena that we wish to make visible. This concept was demonstrated as early as 2019 at Harvard University. It visualizes sound waves and electromagnetic waves for the purposes of learning physics. But today, the same technique applies to practical everyday use cases. Now, in 2030, if we choose to, we can see, hear, or sense it all. We can see the invisible. We perceive reality with astonishing clarity. Another breakthrough that enabled miniaturization of the form factor is the network infrastructure. 5G was a game changer in the 2020s, but 6G is the new kid on the block, bringing a tenfold boost in data transfer. It can now connect not billions, but trillions of objects in IoT. And data centers are now responsible for most of the heavy lifting related to XR. These data centers are now equipped with neuromorphic chips that are a million times faster at processing AI and computer vision. None of the processing and rendering still happens on the devices that are on our bodies. The data centers use 6G to serve pre-processed, pre-rendered imagery straight into our retpros in just a few milliseconds. It enabled devices and sensors to almost disappear into thin air. But the dirty secret is that these data centers now consume 8% of the global electricity usage. Luckily, they aim to rely on 100% renewable energy. This leap forward in infrastructure also made possible the 3Dification of the world. 3Difying the world means that for every physical object, place, or space, we have an equivalent digital representation, a digital twin. What's the benefit of that? It builds a bridge between the physical world and the digital world, which enables us to do much more with much less hardware, less manufacturing, and less travel. In 2030, 95% of the world has been 3Dified. How was that achieved? Well, you have 3.5 billion people wearing retpros that are equipped with an array of cameras and sensors. And with this massive crowdsourcing, it continuously 3Difies the world. That information is constantly captured and fed to the cloud, and then being reconstructed to provide up-to-date 3D content that represents the entire world. And guess what? Thanks to heroic efforts by standard organizations and activists, it's all open, interoperable, and accessible through a spatial discovery service. This common service can be accessed from any device by any person at any time. With these three incredible breakthroughs, a new form factor that we can wear all day, the new networking and processing infrastructure, in a 3D-fied world, we were armed and capable to change the world. What did we do with it? Let's talk about work and learning new skills. So what does the workplace look like in 2030? As many analysts predicted, half of all traditional colleges and corporations cease to exist, and a third of all jobs are now gone. Most lost jobs were replaced by new ones, new jobs that were just recently invented. People needed to quickly adapt to the new work environment. They needed to be able to acquire new skills and learn to perform new jobs. So how did XR help with that? The answer is JIT, just-in-time training. It was first described in 2006 by Werner Vinge in his book, Rainbow's End. The seeds for JIT were planted long ago, like this packing line training application that helped workers learn on the job as early as 2017. Today, in 2030, millions are being quickly reskilled to fill those new jobs with JIT, a process that repeats itself almost every 18 months. But with the advancements in AI and automation, are humans even still needed? Well, the new jobs typically rely on inherent human traits like empathy, creativity, entrepreneurship, and innovation, ethics, and emotional intelligence. It will take more time for AI to catch up to these hard-to-copy human abilities. So for now, augmented humans have still an edge over machines. How do we consume in 2030? We socialize, play, create, entertain, cook, groom, and exercise. We do it all in XR. We are now truly living in the experience economy. With XR, the experience is the product. Immersive, realistic experiences help us identify products that we need and show us how to use them in the best way possible. We mostly immerse shop from home. Only occasionally do we go out to shop on location. We go on location-based shopping only when the experiences they provide are superior to what we can do from home, which takes a lot more advanced tracking and visualization equipment that we cannot afford at home. And we consume less. Today, any physical consumer good that can be replaced by a virtual good is being replaced. Manufacturing of gadgets, toys, art, even fashion were largely replaced by digital things that look, feel, and behave like the real thing. As a result, XR helped transform waste. Manufactured waste has been reduced by half. And of course, we travel and commute much less than before. The 2020 pandemic generated an explosion of awareness to the value of remote meetings and virtual collaboration tools. And since then, the adoption never slowed down. Distance was eliminated. Travel was reduced significantly. In the 2020s, we used to binge watch TV shows. Well, now we binge travel from home. In 2022, a big chunk of the GDP for most countries, especially the US, went to healthcare. XR technologies delivered spectacular changes that helped reduce the cost of healthcare while offering better outcomes. That was thanks to personalized and preventive medicine, as well as telehealth services using XR. It also brought high-quality healthcare to remote and underserved populations. And in some regions of the world, life expectancy has risen by 20%. And there's more. Since sensors allow us to see the invisible, we can now actually sense and see microscopic organisms like viruses and fight it before it spreads. XR has turned the average Joe into a walking laboratory. Organic-based pandemics have been eradicated. mental illness has recently emerged as a major burden on global society. But with dedicated XR applications, it's being prevented and treated with resounding success, establishing XR as a juggernaut for social good. So these transformations in work, consumption, and health helped in the fight against climate change indirectly. But XR had another trick up its sleeves. With XR, we have the ability to visualize and simulate what could happen in various scenarios. We can literally see how different threats could impact our world, and that elicits a visceral reaction. When you see how every action you take impacts climate change, it makes you think twice before you act, and everyone instantly becomes an activist. We were able to change the behavior of billions of people, as well as influence governments and corporate policies. That helped stave off some of the disasters caused by climate change. But despite all that progress, we're still seeing a lot of floods, fires, storms. But XR helps develop better solutions for disaster relief and emergency response. It empowers rescue teams to be more successful in the rescue missions. It's literally saving the day. Don't get me wrong, not everything is rosy in 2030. There's a perpetual tension between truth and fiction. Seeing is no longer believing. Today, we literally can't trust our senses. XR allowed deep fakes to infiltrate our retinas. It's true that new developments also help detect deepfakes and warn us about their presence, but these are pretty confusing times. It reminds me of the great sci-fi novel from 100 years ago, Brave New World, which inspired the title of my talk. The book was about the choice between truth and happiness. Aldous Huxley depicted a dystopian state that imposed happiness on its society while compromising truth. Today, in the spatial new world, reality is strained between two similar dimensions, truth and fiction. The good news is that teenagers today are nurtured to be more visually perceptive than past generations. Thanks to radical changes in education, the scope of STEM literacy has expanded, and it now includes spatial and visual literacy as part of the program. That equips the younger generations with new skills to survive this confusing reality. One of the big concerns around big tech in the 2020s was obviously privacy. So where are we in the privacy wars in 2030? The Internet of Eyes is here with over 10 billion connected cameras and trillions of sensors that constantly record and analyze our every move. So you may be surprised that privacy is not a top concern in 2030. And it's for a simple reason. Companies no longer compete on selling you as the product. Privacy considerations are architected into the XR foundation and are ingrained in every product. And most importantly, the business models have evolved. They do not rely only on offering free services in return for your data. Instead, they trade in knowledge. Here's an example. When you perform a task in your real world, say like operating a coffee machine or fixing your sink, the steps that you take are automatically captured through cameras and sensors while stripping all your personal information. The know-how learned from performing these tasks is aggregated across many users in a knowledge base, and that knowledge helps other people troubleshoot similar tasks using visual and auditory cues. In that way, the 3Dification of the world, combined with crowdsourced knowledge captured from our everyday actions and aggregated through XR, enables privacy-friendly business model. And as a result, the largest internet companies in 2030 do not exploit user information, but trade in knowledge about how the world works. But like with any technology, bad actors can exploit it too. XR made hackers way more powerful. They infiltrate our senses and our retinas with fakes that are indistinguishable from reality. And because we can't tell the truth from fiction, they they can become viral and spread among society. So when you look at the overall picture in 2030, we do have a better world, but not without its challenges. And that brings us to the end of the teleportation. Welcome back to 2020. You may feel dizzy, so watch your step as you enter the present. I want to leave you with this Brady Bunch view of the current big contenders that want to lead the metaverse race. The first thing that pops up is that each contender has a different angle. They see it in a different way based on their strengths. My hope is that the diversity of approaches and opinions will bring forward an end result that is more positive for the future of humanity. Now, I know what you're thinking. Hey, which of these companies would rule in 2030? Any tips for investments? Well, I'm sorry to disappoint you. In my envisioning of the future in 2030, I try to stay away from predicting which companies might win this race. My goal was to envision the big picture and the possibilities. But if you look closely, some of the clues are right there in front of you. So this concludes my envisioning of how spatial computing might change the world in 2030. And I hope that one day we all will read a newspaper that indeed would feature these headlines. The spatial new world of 2030, as described here, is actually plausible. All the ingredients are already here in 2022, but it won't happen unless we aim for it. So hopefully this talk provided you with a little bit of inspiration for what can be achieved with this powerful technology. And by the way, there's tons of research and many demos that support these claims. So if you're interested, reach out to me and I'd be happy to share with you. So when you think about the future of XR and the metaverse, let's all think bigger. Thank you very much.
Hey, everybody. Happy Tuesday. This is Charlene O'Hanlon, and I'm here with the headlines. First up on DevOps.com is an article that outlines the best strategy for migrating to the cloud. As more organizations digitally transform and shift some or all of their operations to the cloud, the right strategy for making the move can mean the difference between success and failure. Many organizations start by moving systems to the cloud and then their data. This article suggests that's the wrong approach. Rather, organizations should move their data first to the cloud. Migrating data to the cloud is relatively quick and easy. It's a project that should take no more than a few days. Moving operations systems, however, can take months or even years. Because an organization depends on these systems to run the business, it needs to plan its migration very carefully. By migrating data first, the organization has the option to do useful and productive things with the data while it waits for business systems to cross the divide. This article delves into some of the other benefits of taking a data-first approach to cloud migration and how to make the most of digital transformation and data in the cloud. And we have a guide to privacy management for developers. Privacy has taken on an unprecedented level of importance in 2022, primarily online privacy. There are multiple reasons behind this increase. The primary one is that users online are now more educated, informed, and concerned than ever before about the collection of their personal data, and perhaps more importantly, how the website is collecting this data, is managing it, and using it. Privacy management refers to the practices, tools, and strategies that an organization develops behind the scenes to ensure that any and all data collected is managed in a way that is fully compliant with data regulations. Like every other division within an organization, the Dev and DevOps teams play a vital role in successfully implementing and executing privacy management solutions. But how can the Dev and DevOps teams contribute in this regard, and where should they begin? Plus, what practices should they be adopting? This article strives to answer these questions and more through some best practices and considerations around the privacy and collection of data. In news, Pulumi has added a business-critical edition of its cloud engineering platform that provides large enterprises with additional security and compliance features, as well as premium 24/7 training, support, training, professional services, and a self-hosting option. In addition, the company announced that Pulumi Enterprise and Business Critical Editions are now available via the online marketplace run by Amazon Web Services, with future availability on other marketplaces planned. The cloud engineering platform from Pulumi enables DevOps teams to use Pulumi packages to create reusable components for automating IT infrastructure provisioning. Those can be embedded within workflows and applications using an API that Pulumi has exposed. IT teams can define a Pulumi package in the programming language of their choice. The cloud engineering platform offers an alternative to managing infrastructure as code that can be centrally managed more easily than open source tools like Terraform. All right, over on Container Journal is an article outlining 6 CNCF projects for continuous integration and delivery. Nowadays, software development teams need a more agile way of working to quickly bring code to life. And CI/CD has been a big enabler for more rapid development models for cloud-native software. Whereas continuous integration is about building and testing code, continuous delivery takes this one step further to deploy code. A well-established CI/CD pipeline validates quality standards, such as code reliability, compliance, and security. But running code through each step of the build phase can be a cumbersome process, and automating these checks can reduce time and room for human error. Setting up a CI/CD pipeline from scratch can be a challenge, not to mention a financial burden if adopting many vendor tools. Thankfully, the CNCF has many open source tools and projects to help accelerate the CI/CD process. This article reviews some of the CNCF-supported CI/CD tools and how they might aid an organization's software delivery requirements. And Deloitte has launched a managed services based on a microservices architecture that enables organizations to build cloud-native applications infused with artificial intelligence. The AIOps.D service will enable organizations to build and deploy microservices-based applications that take advantage of Deloitte's Cortex AI platform, which helps its clients infuse machine and deep learning algorithms into business processes. The goal is to make it possible to deploy a microservices-based application infused with AI capabilities in less than 90 days. Pricing for the AIOps.D service is based on a subscription that requires a minimal upfront investment. Deloitte then works with individuals to define pricing for the application development initiative based on the business outcome. All right, over on Security Boulevard, chip maker NVIDIA is the latest enterprise to fall victim to a cybersecurity breach, which has resulted in the theft of some employee credentials, as well as some of the company's proprietary information. The attack was first noticed by the company February 23rd. The hacking group Lapsus, with a $sign, claimed responsibility for the attack, and according to one report, made off with more than 1 terabyte of data. The group began leaking some of those files online while demanding cryptocurrency payments from NVIDIA to keep the data secret. In a statement, the company said it was aware of the theft and leaking of information and was working to analyze the information. It also said it didn't anticipate any disruption to its business or its ability to serve its customers as a result of the incident. We've got all the details of the attack, including an alleged counterattack leveled on Lapsus by NVIDIA. All right, finally, Attivo Networks has extended Active Directory protection by adding an ability to more efficiently detect identity-based attacks at the domain controller level from all endpoints. Cybercriminals routinely target Active Directory domain controllers to gain the privileges needed to install backdoors, change security policies, and distribute malware. Cybercriminals target Active Directory because it's widely used by organizations to manage who within an organization is allowed to access resources. The hermetic wiper attacks being employed in the Ukraine conflict are the latest examples of an attack that depends on gaining access to privileges that organizations manage via Active Directory. Adavo Networks ADS Secure-DC is designed to identify attacks targeting Active Directory along with suspicious user behaviors using deep packet inspection and behavioral analytics. Good stuff. All right, that's it for the headlines. Please check back with me on Thursday when I'll have some new ones for you. Until then, I hope everybody has a great day, and please, whatever you do, stay safe.
This is Digital Anarchist.
Hey, everybody. Welcome back to Techstrong TV. I'm Charlene O'Hanlon. I'm here now with Katie Noble, who's director of PSIRT, was that PSIRT, and Bug Bounty over at Intel. Katie, thanks so much for joining me today. Really do appreciate it.
Yeah, hi. Nice. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, no problem whatsoever. Glad to have you here. I'm really fascinated about what you guys are doing over at Intel with regards to your bug bounty program, because it seems to be just going great guns there. So I wonder if you can kind of walk me through what your bug bounty program looks like right now and who you guys have involved in it.
Yeah, so just to kind of give you a little bit of a background on it, Intel launched our bug bounty program in 2017. And at that time, it was a private program, so by invite only. And then in 2018, we opened that program up to the public. So it's an open continuous program. And so it's been an open continuous program since 2018. And what that means is that anybody anywhere in the world can submit vulnerabilities to us and we'll look at them. And then what we've done recently is we've launched a new expansion of our bug bounty program, which is called the Project Circuit Breakers campaign. And what that aims to do is add on to our already open continuous program by really getting in and meeting the researchers where they are.
Oh, okay. So what does that involve then? And how deep does it go?
So it is a work in progress. What we are doing is by having the Project Circuit Breakers campaign, what we can do is we can host specific events, targeted events. We can really dive into training sessions and specific hackathons and time-boxed events. We can bring in researchers that we think show a really great aptitude for some of our products that we're working on and train them up a little bit, give them that unique opportunity to sit with some of our engineers and get some of that hands-on training that they may never have gotten before. So it's really a wonderful opportunity to kind of get in deep with the researcher community.
That's really great. So how did you guys come up upon this particular idea? Because it seems like it's, it really does take the bug bounty program one step further and to actually kind of, rather than kind of saying, oh, okay, thanks for finding the bug, here's your check, go away. It's like, you're bringing these people into your folds and really kind of taking their relationship a level deeper.
Yeah. So over the last couple of years, we're really trying to refine that security, kind of the commitment to security, right? And so we've said, what can we do to change the way that we think about bug bounty programs? So a lot of companies have bug bounty programs, and they're a wonderful extension of your vulnerability disclosure program. But like you said, it's kind of a submit anything, thanks for your submission, and that's really where it ends. And we said, okay, well, Intel is a very uniquely positioned within the industry right now. But our products are a little bit different than what you may see in some other companies. And so we realized that takes kind of a very special skill set, and it doesn't organically exist within the community. So we said, well, what can we do to take that extra step? Because we realize it's that question of, do you build it or do you buy it, right? I'm not going to be able to find the solution on the shelf, so I need to build it. And how can I build it? And so we started deconstructing what we could do to take steps to really reach the researchers. And this is kind of where we settled.
That's great. That's great. So you said it's a work in progress. So how far along are you guys into this project? And have you actually started onboarding any of the researchers?
Yes, we have. In December, we launched the Camping with Tigers live hacking event. And so that event brings in 20 security researchers. It is focused on the Tiger Lake platform. So we gave them the device and we're giving them specific training on the device. So every week they get a training session with some Intel engineers. We sit down with them and answer their questions. And we're trying to focus it more of rather than sort of an adversarial relationship, we want this to be a team. So there's that very famous quote, a rising tide raises all ships. Mm-hmm. And so what we're trying to do is say, like, okay, through Camping with Tigers, we're going to sit down with security researchers. We're going to give them that extra training. We're going to answer their questions and we're going to really meet them where they are. And it's been wonderful so far. We've had some really great submissions. Started in December. It's going to end in May, but so far it's been really fantastic.
Excellent. Excellent. So how many people do you actually have in the program right now?
Yeah, so this first pilot, the Camping with Tigers pilot, has 20 security researchers. We are going to have some more events coming in the next year or so. But like I said, it's a work in progress. So we want to make sure that we're able to do that crawling before we run a marathon.
Yeah. Well, that sounds great, and I imagine the researchers really enjoy it as well because it does give them access to your researchers and your developers, and kind of helping them further the conversation. And yeah, to your point, the rising, I think it's rising tide lifts all boats, or something very similar to that. So I can't imagine that there are any downsides to actually bringing these security researchers into the Intel fold to have that idea exchange and that thought leadership, just occur on a much more granular level. So what has been the response so far from the industry, the security industry at large, regarding what Intel is doing, especially with the Project Circuit Breaker program?
So I've seen a lot of positive responses. I've been contacted quite a bit in the social media world, and then we've seen a lot of interest. We've seen a lot of researchers contacting us and saying, hey, how do I participate in these events? And so that's been really fantastic. We've also seen a lot of subject matter experts come to us and say, how can I participate in these events? How can I give trainings? How can I help with show and tell sessions? And so it's an opportunity for not only the security researchers, but also some developers and microcode engineers to really be able to share that lessons learned. And so I think that increased collaboration has been fantastic so far.
That's really great to hear. And considering all of the issues that we've been hearing about and experiencing over the last 12 months, particularly with software supply chain issues, and understanding that open source code and pretty much all code basically, needs to be updated and secured from the start. I imagine that the timing is perfect for this type of program. So what do you guys expect for the program moving forward? Do you expect to maybe, double the size of researchers, the number of researchers who get involved in a particular camp, or however you label your sessions? Or what is it that you guys see on the horizon for it?
So we're looking at this as a long-term kind of campaign, right? So we wanted to start small with a couple of pilot programs. And then ultimately what we'd like to see is we'd like to start doing these events multiple times a year. We'd love to do capture the flag exercises, immersion training exercises, as well as the live hacking events. And so it's hard to point at specifics and say, I want to do 2 capture the flag exercises per year. But I mean, I really do want to do 2 capture the flag exercises per year. But, so we're trying to make sure one of the big problems that we see is that the researcher community has a lot of attention right now. And so we're kind of sharing researchers with other companies too. And so it's making sure that we can keep the researcher community interested in our products and in our work. We go back to that rising tide, raises all ships, right? It's all about making the entire community better and safer. And so we have to balance that as well.
Well, it's, it really sounds like a great program and obviously very beneficial to the community at large. And so it seems like it would actually spur a lot of future collaboration between these security researchers and their companies and Intel. So have you had any maybe inklings or conversations with folks yet about these, possible future collaborations?
Yes. So there is a group called the Bug Bounty Community of Interest. And the Bug Bounty Community of Interest is about 40 different companies. They're bug bounty managers. And so it's focused on sharing information back and forth on some of these common challenges that we all experience within the community. And so when we were thinking about launching the Bug Bounty or the Project Circuit Breakers campaign, the Bug Bounty expansion, we actually circulated the idea with some other companies. And we said, what do you think about this? And the response has been pretty overwhelmingly fantastic. So much so that we've talked about, well, maybe we can do some coordinated events in the future as well. Not just Intel, not just Project Circuit Breakers, but Project Circuit Breakers and maybe the Yahoo Paranoids program or the DoD Hack the Pentagon program. And so looking at some of that cross communication has been really, really fantastic. I think it's been well received so far. So I'm really excited.
Well, it sounds like a great endeavor, like I said, and it can only benefit the community at large because, we all benefit when, except maybe the hackers, but, with the good guys benefit when
the nefarious hackers, the good guys,
exactly. Nefarious. They've got to be nefarious. But I wish you guys great luck with the program moving forward. It sounds like it's going to be a rousing success. And judging from the feedback that you've received so far, I know that the community is really in need of something like this. So, Kate, thank you so much for taking a few minutes and talking to me about Project Circuit Breaker and your bug bounty program at large. It's really, really good stuff. I do appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
All right, everybody, please stick around. We've got lots more Techstrong TV coming up, so stay tuned.
Everybody, happy Tuesday. This is Charlene O'Hanlon, and I'm here now with the webinars preview. I always tell you I have so many great webinars coming up on DevOps.com, Container Journal, and Security Boulevard. I got 3 here for you that I hope you will enjoy, and you can mark your calendar and join us. The first one is called Managing Response in the Evolving Cybersecurity Landscape. This one is happening Wednesday, that's tomorrow, folks, March 9th at 1 p.m. Eastern on DevOps.com. It is sponsored by Everbridge. Digital transformation has accelerated the growth of business, but as digital capabilities expand, so too do opportunities for these digital systems to be compromised. While the industry is focused heavily on monitoring and detection of cyber threats, that alone does not prevent compromise or downtime. So it's time for organizations to plan for that unexpected attack, and putting tools and automation in place to contain and recover from an attack before it affects your business. Operational resilience is measured from the customer's experience of your service. So what will your customers experience during a cyber attack? This webinar will discuss why operational resilience is more than systems monitoring, how to recognize whether teams are ready to solve major cyber events, why cyber threat containment requires planning, and finally, why automation is required for experts to respond to threats rapidly. All right, the second webinar is called How to Leverage Defense in Depth to Prepare for the Next Log4j. This one is happening Thursday, March 10th at noon Eastern on DevOps.com. This one is sponsored by WhiteSource. When the Log4j vulnerability was announced in December, some companies were prepared and they completely mitigated and remediated their risks within hours of the announcement. What can you learn from their approach, and how can you prepare for the next inevitable widespread vulnerability? This webinar focuses on how organizations can be prepared to handle the next major vulnerability announcement. That's going to be a good one as well. All right, the final webinar is called Integrate Security Controls Wherever You Build Applications. This one is happening Tuesday, March 15th at 9 p.m. Eastern on Security Boulevard. So grab your popcorn, guys. This is going to be an evening event not to be missed. This one is sponsored by Sneak. Secure software delivery for modern applications requires security tooling that can be integrated neatly into the iterative DevOps application or DevOps model, automating security controls directly into developer workflows to find and fix issues proactively before those workloads reach production. Snyk has partnered closely with Atlassian and AWS to build native integrations into their Atlassian Bitbucket and AWS Code Pipeline services, bridging the gap between development and security teams and empowering modern organizations to bring products to market securely without any loss in developer speed. This webinar will demonstrate how organizations can leverage automated security controls within Atlassian Bitbucket, leverage open source vulnerability scanning within AWS Code Pipeline, continuously find and fix vulnerabilities in source control and function repos, and leverage deep insights and actionable remediation advice to fix security issues quickly. All right, that's it for the webinar's preview. Please check back with me on Thursday when I'll have a fresh new batch for you. Until then, I hope everybody has a great day, and please, whatever you do, stay safe.
DevOps.com is the #1 online destination for DevOps education and community building. DevOps.com covers all aspects of DevOps, including DevOps best practices and tools, DevOps culture, DevSecOps, business impact, continuous testing, continuous delivery, and more. DevOps.com has the largest collection of original DevOps content, featuring breaking news, blog posts, podcasts, and more. Visit www.devops.com to learn more. DevOps.com, where the world meets DevOps.
All right, rounding out today's Techstrong TV broadcast, we have The View with Vizard. And in this one, Mike Vizard is speaking with Guljeet Nagpal, who is the Chief Product Officer for XLQ. They discuss why automated testing has become a necessity. Great conversation. It's a great topic. So let's go ahead and roll it now.
This is Digital Anarchist.
Hey guys, thanks for the throw. We're here with Guljeet Nagpal, who's Chief Product Officer for XLQ, and we're talking about all things related to testing. Guljeet, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Mike. Thanks for having me.
Do you think the whole testing focus has increased somewhat in the last few months with the whole shift to digital transformation, and people are trying to develop more applications than ever? And I think it's kind of critical to get it right the first time these days. I think the tolerance for experimenting on end users, especially in a digital business context, is a lot lower. But is there some sort of fundamental shift going on with testing that you're seeing?
Yeah, both things you mentioned, Mike, are right on. It's the digital transformation is clearly been on steroids almost now for past couple of years, right? Since we've seen the world kind of changing around us with remote work and a lot of processes which were even in healthcare and financial space, which were kind of buried with red tapes and manual. All of them have been kind of almost on steroids to become more automated, and organizations have had to kind of put their transformation objectives a much more on fast track. And that, like you rightly said, automatically leads to having, ship the applications much faster to their customers to run their businesses faster. And the need for automated testing for shipping their software faster gets even more critical.
Where does that automation taking place? Are we automating tests for the developer as we shift things left, or is the automation more in the CI/CD DevOps platform and we're trying to automate it there because that may be the place where the application itself comes together? Otherwise, each developer is testing a small piece of something, but maybe not the whole thing end to end.
That's exactly right. I mean, we live in a world where there is an app for everything, right? That has been true from a consumer perspective, But now, interestingly, that's more so true on our enterprise application side, right? Back in the days, if you remember, we had a couple ERPs and then we had some homegrown systems, and that's kind of how the IT landscape of organizations look like, right? But now, with the onset of cloud apps, with packaged applications, with vertical applications, there is an app for everything for enterprises to be able to go more automated. And what that translates to is a highly integrated enterprise application ecosystem. And what that means is unit testing or just shifting left in terms of automation is not going to be enough, right? You would really need that end-to-end validation. And each app has at least 5 and upstream and 5 downstream integrations, which means the real automation and the real customer experience in terms of your end-to-end workflow has to be automated across the board. So that DevOps CI/CD pipeline you talked about, that gets even more kind of focus in terms of being able to validate that end-to-end workflow. So that's kind of where we are really seeing the need for automation more than kind of what we would have thought, right? That from a shift left perspective, that's absolutely necessary because you want to build a stronger product, right? You don't want to be reactive in building a strong product. You want to bake quality into the product, but then downstream, you want to make sure your end-to-end workflows work as desired in terms of an integrated end-to-end system.
How far down the path are we to achieving that goal? Because I think somewhere along the line, everybody maybe thinks that testing is somebody else's job, but what's the maturity level of testing these days in terms of automation?
Yeah, and like with a few different functions within our IT, we kind of see kind of a full circle come back, right? A lot of testing was starting to get perceived as commoditized, right? And we saw, a lot of testing kind of getting shipped, from that perspective as a cost function. But quickly, organization realized that, without continuous testing, there is no continuous delivery, right? And that's really the crux of it. That if you can't have a dependable, reliable, continuous test automation to bridge that gap between your dev and ops, there is no DevOps, because that's the key bridge between your dev and ops, right? So with that notion, right, the testing maturity level has struggled. And to be honest, a lot of automation approaches, and I spent over a decade with HP, right? A lot of traditional automation tools and approaches have focused more on silos because our app ecosystem was not that integrated back in the days, right? It used to kind of have integrations, but not at the level we are seeing today, right? So the need for an automation approach that can pan across these technology stacks, right, is now kind of more new and is now more critical. So the testing maturity in terms of what approaches are out there has struggled, right? But we are now starting to see customers really needing that across technology stack approach, right? And that's kind of where, AxleQ has a sweet spot.
Mm-hmm. Do you think the rise of microservices is forcing the automated testing issue because we're reaching a level of complexity that I can't really manually test all these things?
I would say yes. Microservices, has become, just in the last 5 years, interestingly, Mike, we have seen API testing as part of critical, proof of concepts to when customers come and try AxleQ out, a platform like AxleQ out, in terms of seeing whether it's fit for their needs or not. And just in the last 5 years, we've seen at least 3 times the interest in making sure that APIs can be validated apart from their UI. But like I said, it's really more about how that validation can be done across the technology stacks. So to give you an example, a healthcare customer of ours, right, one of the top 5 companies in the world, they had a use case where a patient walks into a pharmacy to put in, their prescription, right? But now, with COVID and everything, the automation's gone kind of boosted, and now they can key in their prescriptions directly through their mobile apps connected to their healthcare providers, right? And once that prescription is keyed in, there are at least 20 downstream processes that are kicked in, including mainframe systems, microservices call, a database that's maybe sitting on a cloud, but then coming back to a pharmacy system which is still living in an old school desktop world, right? So the real demand, what we are seeing is kind of which spans this across technology stack, because that's what the user experience we live in, right?
Mm-hmm. How smart can testing get? We hear a lot about artificial intelligence these days. Will the whole thing become automated, or what will be the role of the tester per se?
Yeah, that's a great question. And, AI unfortunately gets thrown around very loosely these days, right? Especially more so, with saying, talking about how AI is the platform. We've looked at it always as a tool in our toolkit, right? Ever since the inception of our platform, we've always looked at how we can leverage AI to make things more efficient, as opposed to saying AI is the platform, right? So we've always looked at it more realistically. And that's kind of how, if you see, forget AI for a second, that's kind of how, if you see how as people, we've embraced technology, right? In various aspects, technology has enabled us to increase our throughputs, right? Regardless of which process area we pick in. And that's kind of how we see AI. If it leveraged accurately, it's going to increase the throughput of our test engineers. It's going to increase the throughput of our automation engineers. And at various process areas within test automation lifecycle, that's kind of how we've looked to leverage AI.
Mm-hmm. Do you think we're approaching a point where the number of applications being built is overwhelming the testers that are out there, and the pace of that work is getting to a point where they become a bottleneck?
Yeah, I was having a discussion on the same lines with our Forrester analyst, and one of the interesting discussion points around that was we all, as testers and within the DevOps space, have to almost take a step back and understand what needs to be tested before going about kind of in the traditional manner testing it. So yes, it can be overwhelming with so many apps coming together so quickly in terms of being able to serve our businesses. But a lot of these apps in which are getting shipped for our businesses, for these organizations, are cloud apps or maybe packaged app, vertical apps. All they need is configurations, integrations with other apps, and then they can kind of start doing the job in terms of the outcome that the businesses are expecting. So it almost needs some level of refactoring, a new mindset when you think about in this new world of apps, how should you be testing and what you should be testing to get the maximum bang for your buck, right? So it's easy to get overwhelmed, but with automation and the right approach to what needs to be tested, right, you can kind of be more efficient with your efforts.
Mm-hmm. Who writes the tests these days? It seems to me a lot of time and effort has been spent on creating the tests. And as we automate that process, can we get to the point where the machines can create the tests? I mean, to what degree do I need to create the tests versus run the tests?
Yeah, that's an interesting point. And the way we look at it is, unfortunately, the way testing and automation specifically has evolved, the traditional approaches I talked about, they've lived in two ends of the spectrum, Mike, right? One end of the spectrum being, very record and playback oriented. But we've seen in the past 20 years, automation's not new. It's been around for at least a couple decades. Back when we released Windrunner, I don't know if that rings a bell, right? I was part of the original Windrunner team. At one point, we had about 70% market share, right? And record and playback was the thing in automation. But in the last 10 years, there have been a plethora of tools which have come on the same lines of recording and playback, but we've seen that they just are not scalable enough to deal with the changing technology stack, right? They're just not real world enough to work across technology stack. A lot of other things in terms of design challenges and so on. The other end of the spectrum that we live in is open source, right? And you kind of pointed to, how testing had been shipped out to as a cost function, and open source made a big kind of into the test automation area, but that became a specialist function. And the reason this is important to your point of the question is, when automation has become a specialist function, because we've seen about 60-65% market share. Last Gartner did a survey of open source taking over a lot of kind of testing and automation approaches. But when you see that, it becomes a specialized function. And all my testing team is a mixed bag of testers, maybe some automation engineers, but a lot of business subject matter expertise, right? And if you really want a strong test approach, you need to make the subject matter experts, people who understand business rules, that needs to be validated as part of the automation, right? And that's kind of where both the ends of the spectrum have to meet, right? Where a non-technical, non-specialized tester should also be able to be part of that automation. And that can only become if our platforms are smarter, right? May it be depending on that suite to be to be adaptable, right? May it be leveraging machine in certain cases, to your point, right? To be able to write smarter test cases, right? To basically have your automation more leaner and meaner, right? So that it can do more with kind of less in terms of authoring and design changes and change impacts with so many releases happening. So absolutely, I mean, testing has to get out of the specialized function role.
Right. We hear a lot of focus these days on security, of course. Do you think that security ultimately will become part of a quality assurance testing process? Because it's not clear to me that those are two distinct functions anymore. They might be joined at the hip in some fashion.
I sure hope so. The strongest of the softwares and the organizations in the past 1 year, we've seen outages which we would have never imagined, right? AWS went out a few times. Facebook, Meta went out a few times, and you name it, right? And security has to become an integral part. And we're seeing this more and more as part of functional regression tests. Customers want to have those security regression tests. See, security lived, in two worlds until now. One was static code analysis, which is let's do static code analysis, which is good. It's kind of like shifting left to your unit test, right? Yes, you got to find your vulnerabilities right when your code's written. But once the code is in action, what vulnerabilities come, it can be a different game, right? So static code analysis is where security lived in. And like you said, that's why it was a little bit in the different world. And then you had dynamic, dynamic security firewalls, which are kind of more glorified firewalls. But in the middle, right, that functional testing, leveraging security validations is a gap in the industry right now. And we are certainly looking to fill that gap. We've already helped a lot of Fortune 100 customers, including certain financial services customers, to fill in that gap, leveraging the functional automation approach, because they've had some solutions around these two things, but functional is where it needs to get seeded into, right? So like you said, it has to become mainstream into the testing and functional automation space.
All right. So other than hanging out on your website, what's your best advice to folks about how to get to this continuous testing nirvana, I guess, because ultimately time is money. So every time an application has a disjointed experience, somebody's losing money somewhere, right?
Totally. Automation first. Automation first is the key, right? A lot of traditional mindset still remains that let's write my manual tests and let's convert them into automation. The mindset has to change. The organizational approach has to change to automation first. And for automation first, you can only do automation first if it's not a specialist function. Don't get caught up into writing technical, getting buried into a technical debt. You don't want 1 million lines of code to test 1 million lines of code, right? So, figure a more robust solution out and go automation first, right? And that'll help set you on the right path.
All right. Gurjeet, thanks for being on the show.
Thanks, Mike. Thanks for having me.
All right. Back to you guys in the studio.
SecurityBoulevard.com is the leading resource for news, analysis, and education on challenges facing the cybersecurity industry. SecurityBoulevard.com covers all aspects of cybersecurity, including data security, DevSecOps, cloud security, application security, network security, security threats, and more. SecurityBoulevard.com has the largest selection of security content, featuring breaking news, blog posts, podcasts, and more. Visit www.securityboulevard.com to learn more. SecurityBoulevard.com, home of Security Bloggers Network.
All right, that wraps up another Techstrong TV broadcast. Hope you enjoyed today's episode as much as I enjoyed bringing it to you. Just another quick reminder, we've got some great events coming up, folks. Starting March 29th, we've got some in-person events happening in Atlanta. On March 29th, we have the DevOps Cloud Native Live one-day workshop event. On March 30th, we have the Cybersecurity Live one-day workshop event. Both of those are being held in Atlanta at the Loudermilk Center. Totally worth checking out if you are in the area, you want to check it out. And then 2 weeks later, we have those two events happening in Washington, D.C. at Convene in downtown D.C. We also have some live events later in the year. We have our InnoTech conferences that are starting up in April. Those are regional one-day conferences dedicated to all things IT. So we've got one happening in Austin, we've got one in Houston, we've got one in Dallas, we've got one in Oklahoma City, we've got one in Washington, D.C. So our Techstrong live events, the full calendar can be found at techstrongevents.com, and you can see all of the locations for our one-day workshop events. You can see all of the dates and locations for our InnoTech events, plus you can check out all of the virtual events that we have on tap, as well as our other live events throughout the year. So you'll be able to check out the agendas, the speaker lineups, and register for any and all of these events. And there's a lot there, so I highly recommend you check out techstrongevents.com. All right, that is it for today's Techstrong TV broadcast. I will be back on Thursday with a new broadcast for you. Until then, I hope everybody has a great day, and please, whatever you do, stay safe.